Welcome to Thriving Rockstar with Alex Rake, and today's guest is Michael Abdow. How are you, Mike?
Excellent, Alex. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it has. We haven't seen each other since we were on tour together.
Yeah. That was a wonderful time. Well, how you been since then? What you been up to?
Quite a bit. It's been a little while.
It has been a
So
little while.
we've both been up to quite a bit,
Oh
right?
yeah. I
not
wasn't. I
to-
wasn't up to this back then. So, although,
yeah.
Although it was a thought. It was a thought.
It was in its infancy.
Yeah.
Like you were planting the seed, thinking about it.
Yeah, I was asking people for interviews, and I didn't even know why. So.
Mhm. Oh, it's interesting.
Yeah, I was curious, so I just kind of wanted to explore that, health music space, so, but yeah, so what have you done? I mean, you released a record since then?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Since we saw each other, I did. I released my latest solo record in April.
Mhm.
And before that, I worked on the majority of Ray Alder's solo record with him,
Mhm.
and we released that. And that's as far back as I can think right now. I mean, it's just kind of all blurs together. But yeah, I mean, those last two things I definitely happened since we saw each other.
Yeah.
Other things were probably in the works, but
Right. So, yeah, I'm curious, like, how did you meet, like, Ray, and how did that whole connection happen to Fate's Warning?
Well, I met Ray through Fate's Warning. Started working with the band, and I think it was around the time that Jim and John Arch were doing the Arch Matheos, the second Arch Matheos record. Ray was interested in doing a solo record, and he had already started working on it, and I just kind of like threw it out there, to him, I'd love to work on this with you if you wanted to. And so we started, the way that works is you don't really say, yes, let's do it, let's commit. You just kind of feel it out, see if it's going to work. And started sending him demos, and he was digging it. So we pursued it, and I ended up doing a bunch of that with him.
Sounds like dating.
It's very much like dating.
It's like courtship, right? Like you just like tread carefully. It's like it's not serious yet.
Well, yeah, but unlike dating, I think when you're working with musicians, both people are being pursued by the music.
Right.
If you imagine it like that, because not two musicians, neither one of them is pursuing the other necessarily, because if you're honest with yourself, you don't know if it's going to work.
Right.
So the music is pursuing you, and you have to ask yourself if it's going to work, and they have to be honest with themselves, if it's going to work. Otherwise, you might find yourself in something that's forced, and the music isn't what it should be.
Right.
So you're like both on the both musicians are not being, they're the ones being pursued, by the situation, and whether the situation takes hold is, who knows,
Yeah.
So.
It's interesting. I mean, I've discussed this repeatedly, and it's definitely the case that music is not something that comes from inside us. It feels like something that we catch and translate, and and when you're with different people, you play with different people, you get like a very different concoction, and and it might work, or it might be something that doesn't quite gel as well, but that's cool that it worked out.
Yeah, I was really happy with some of the songs. Some of my favorite songs I've done have been for that project.
Nice.
But you're absolutely right. I think what you said, it's like something that you kind of catch. The music doesn't come from within. But that makes perfect sense, because if you imagine the musical reservoir, as I've heard it be called, you feed your reservoir with what you listen to and what you like, and then that all comes out when you go to write. So none of it ever truly comes from within. It's all just you're spitting back what you've, not verbatim, but your version of what you've perceived.
Sure.
Right.
I genuinely think there's something like akin to that thought of the collective unconscious, just this ether that we pull from, and of course the as far as ideas are concerned, and I don't think musicians are exempt from that kind of thing, because it's definitely something that happens in science. These kind of ideas come into the space and and move things ahead.
Mm-hmm.
So that's quite an interesting thing. So this last record, how did you approach that, like your solo record?
Oh, well, that's kind of my solo music is just kind of anything goes. It's my, you know, it's indulgent. It's not necessarily indulgent in me and my playing. It's just indulgent in music. Like, what do I want to hear? I can do anything I want, and that's my only rule, is just do whatever I want with it. So that's always been my approach. So,
Mm.
just trying to follow the ear, and what you're feeling.
It's interesting because it sounds like something that could be very therapeutic. It's like whatever you just have in there that you want to express, you just lay it all out and articulate that. And so if you're in a project, in a more long-term project where you work with other people, where you might not have as much creative control, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's greatest for the music, but at the same time, you still might have some of that, like, well, I want to do this little musical idea, and something where, a space where you can express all that.
Yeah, you're right. The main all that's happening for sure, but the main reason why I do solo music and that whole thing is because the reason I got into music was because of the wonder of the unknown, and it's art. It's like, what can you create? So that's just where I can really pursue that.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, when you're working with other people, there are natural parameters in what you're doing, and that's great because projects need to have direction, especially when you're working with other people. But to really explore your imagination and what you can just, it's infinite, and so I like to have my space I can go to pursue the infinite, and that's my solo music.
Yeah. Pursuing the infinite, for sure. I mean, that's like, it's almost like a spiritual journey,
Very much so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I think, if we're honest with ourselves as musicians, that's what we're sort of taking part in when we write, It's
Mm-hmm.
very much a devotional kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's, if you acknowledge that, that's, I think we all walk the fine line sometimes of like writing things that we're familiar with, or maybe things that we've heard before, and maybe they're too familiar, and that's not necessarily the pursuit that you just described.
Mm.
So you kind of need to be like super honest with yourself, and when you're in it, are you in the right headspace, or are you just regurgitating something that's familiar? We're all guilty of it.
Sure.
At times.
I feel that it could be unproductive to be too original, because as much as we can draw from this pool, this pool of infinite ideas and such, if we want our music to land anywhere, it needs to have at least some sense of familiarity. I think I've heard it said somewhere, if art is more than 15% unique, it's like avant-garde at that point, right? And it's hard. It's not as palatable because it can't sit enough on what came before it to add to it, because it's so separate. So it's kind of like if you look at all of music history like a narrative, it could be like a character that's sort of too much of a leap, or a scene that's too much of a leap ahead of the previous scene. Rather than continuing the narrative and taking it up in an adventurous way, it stands too separated. But that said, I mean, like, some of my favorite players, Steve Vai, and, like I love that. I love when they go, far, but sometimes you gotta admit, it's just like, it's a little less to latch onto. It's only because I'm a geek that I could enjoy that kind of pursuit, but it'll be hard on the ears of most.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
So, would you consider yourself somebody who tries to really take leaps and bounds?
No. After all that, I agree 100% with you.
Mm-hmm.
But no, for the very reason that I'm just a product of what I'm a fan of.
Sure.
And so, I'm trying to use my imagination and create something that is unique that I want to listen to. And so, it has to be unique, because if it sounds like something else, it's not interesting to me. I don't want to listen to it. But if I just maybe go through no, I'm not digging on 12-tone rows or anything, but let's say I use a device like that to create a song.
Right.
There's precedent for that, and I've heard some interesting pieces, but usually portions of them are interesting, and then the 12-tone aspect kicks in, and you're like, oh, they had to go there. They weren't feeling that. It wasn't intuitive.
Right.
It was forced by the theory. It was forced by the mechanism. And that, I feel like, is where the stuff that's really out there and irrelevant it's kind of a product of that sort of mindset.
Right.
In the writing. But if it's intuitive, if it feels good, then it's really hard to make stuff that people don't feel, because if it feels good to you, someone's going to feel it, right?
Yeah. You ever heard, speaking of 12-tone, I think was it Bobby's brother, Bobby Jarzombek's brother?
Ronnie. Yeah.
Ronnie. Yeah. So if you heard his 12-tone kind of stuff, he's had a few songs that were straight up 12-tone, but he did it in a very unique way. He did it in a very artful way, where he sort of outlined 3 diminished chords, half step apart from each other, and then that kind of worked out to be like a 12-tone thing, and it sounded really cool, right? And it was just an awesome riff, it had groove, it had all the other elements, right? And so what it produced, even though it was sort of produced from this theoretical underpinning, it was just a riff that just keeps going somewhere, that doesn't quite land until it's repeating again, but it just has that continuation feel, if for lack of a better word. So yeah, I feel like, but it's definitely something to be cognizant of, because it as players, as musicians, when we learn something, we tend to be, and we don't fully incorporate it. Say we're still sort of figuring it out. We could be a victim of it and use it in a very limited way, where it basically puts us in a little box, such as the literal box of the pentatonics or something like that,
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting when you've incorporated it so much, you've mastered the technique, and you can sort of speak that language.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was thinking, just that when you're describing Ronnie's music. I've heard some of it, and it's not bizarre and awkward. I mean, it's got, it's modern, and it's very, there's dissonance in there, but it's not this thing where you can't relate to it, or it's not appealing,
right? Musically,
it's not weird for the sake of being weird.
He's
got the language down, and he's creating real music with it.
There's something very interesting on just atonality in general. If you think about what that was historically, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember studying in my undergrad, when I was studying music in my undergrad and studying music history, atonality was an answer of being bored with tonality, right? So it was a departure, and then we realized well, there's no substance here, and there's you can't feel anything, and everything is just oh, I understand the theory here. That was that was where music was at that point, at least classical music, and so being that's where we're pulling from, then that could very much invite that kind of same feel into your music, which is not a positive thing, right? Perhaps it wasn't until like I guess postmodernism or whatever in music at least that we got to a point where we can sort of go back to the stuff that we know sounded good, you know, before things went atonal, you know, the kind of late 19th century stuff, like Dvorak and or even some early 20th century stuff, you know, like let's say like Stravinsky, right? And he had a lot of atonality, but he also had a lot of tonality in there, kind of mixed in with it. I don't want to get too much in the weeds on this, but but the idea is like, you know, we need to we can't ignore melody, because I think melody is what drives us emotionally, and I think music is I think the reason we're in music is because it affected us emotionally, right? And so we have to remind ourselves of that, right? I'm assuming that's the case.
It is the case for me. And you obviously, but maybe not, you know, some people are maybe not in it for that reason, you know, just fascinated by the structures and the theory and everything, you know. I'm sure that's out there too, but I 100% relate to what you're saying. You know,
it's interesting, like, cause like when it comes to that, I think that comes down to personality, right? So people who would relate to it more, say structurally, would be the type of person who is more who has the temperament that's more like analytical, and you know, and yeah, we all know people like that. That's I think a quarter of our population. I remember like looking at like different personality types, although I had someone on my show who totally debunked that whole system of like, you know, because all the popular personality tests are kind of predicated on these theories that really have no ground to them. But there are studies, like if you dating back millennia, that are like pointing to people being roughly in 4 categories, and one of them is like that type of analytical, technical minded, very math oriented type of person, who's more things focused than people, right? Is often not a very social person, kind of awkward socially often, unless they've developed that aspect of themselves, but they just tend to be more appreciative of technical forms, if you would, you know, just logic and all of that, right? And those kinds of people end up being engineers and scientists and all of that, whereas people who are a little bit more concerned with the esoteric kinds of things end up being like musicians.
Right.
And so I guess an overwhelming amount of my audience is that, you know.
But then you take those 2 personality types and kind of cross them over, and maybe, you know, you get very interesting music when those types of people who have both those traits begin writing, you know. And I'm sure we can think of artists,
and then Prog is born.
Like, yeah. There you go. Yeah.
I mean, essentially that's what Prog is, right? It's just Prog on, you know, nerdy, you know, gone all the way nerdy, you know, like whether it's you know, this classical stuff or some other technical exploration. That's definitely a thing. That's interesting. So you mentioned before we started the call, you know, like we started this call a little later because your daughter. How long you been a father?
My daughter's, she's 2.5 years now.
Wow. So
that probably happened since the last time I saw you too.
Wow.
I think maybe.
Yeah. It's 2017. Yeah. It has happened. Yeah. So that was like what, late 2017 or early 2018?
Yeah, she was born November of 2017.
There you go.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's a big development.
Yeah, she's great. She's already sitting down with the guitar. She tells me when I'm practicing and she wants my attention, she says, "Daddy, put guitar back." And then like we have an acoustic guitar hanging out in one of the rooms on a little stand, and she comes over to me, she goes, "Play the guitar." But she doesn't want me to play it, she wants to play it, so she just puts it in her lap and starts ripping on the strings and mouthing something. Like, like this kid's crazy.
That's awesome. That's wonderful. Wow. And when you were on tour with us, you that means you're pregnant. Your wife was pregnant at the time.
Oh yeah.
Like how far in would she be at that point? Like 4 or 5 months in?
Yeah, it was pretty early still. I mean, not in the beginning, not in the first trimester, I don't think. But yeah, it must have been like second, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. And was your partner still working at the time?
Yeah. So yep. We've been married since 2014. So, she she's just gets the 3 months maternity leave after she has the baby, and so that was the case with my daughter Nora, and then our daughter that we're expecting, Fiona. We're expecting her in November, and
got the name already? Good to go?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. And so she'll have 3 months maternity leave, and then I'm the primary caretaker during the day, and then any work I do, gigs usually, always at night, and any work I'm doing in my home studio or like we're doing tonight is always after she goes to bed, because I just have her during the day.
Wow, only 3 months, huh? Maternity.
That's the U.S. for you.
Wow. See, I wasn't even aware. I think I heard it being 9 months somewhere else.
Yeah.
Or a year.
Yeah, it's much longer, and I think in certain countries, I want to say in Scandinavia, I could be totally wrong. I thought I heard that both the father and the mother get the maternity leave or the family leave to be parents to the child in its infancy. So who would have thought of that?
It's something that, if you understand the psychological literature at all, makes perfect sense. I mean, if you're investing, think about, like, I'm not gonna like say this in a political way, but it might come out political. But the idea is that if a government wants to improve its working class, its middle class, that it would perhaps make that a requirement, or even subsidize the companies to do that, to give them that time off, that paid time off, because, or at least partially paid, right? I don't know if something
that makes sense.
Something that makes sense, right? Because that's the future of your country fundamentally a generation later. Because if your parent, a child isn't properly parented at the beginning and neglected, then that could be at best a less productive member of society.
Yes, and see, this isn't a political discussion at all.
Right. I think it's a psychological one.
It falls into a lot of different categories, right? I mean, my wife is a social worker, and so we've had the conversation many times about the investment up front in just supporting the family unit, and even if it's a single parent, just supporting the child and the child's development and their upbringing is much more cost effective than supporting everything, all the complications they could run into later on in life as a result of kind of like getting it wrong when they were young. And that's something that it's not a political thing. It's something that society could re-examine, and it would be better for everyone. There's so many like problems that can be kind of traced back to that sort of thing. Not in any definitive way, like this is where this comes from, but it's just a product of a lot of different things that people go through in their lives, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
Just upbringing and
the data is clear on that, I think, as far as like, as far as the psychological side of it, that, most of the behaviors, productivity and such that someone experiences or doesn't experience later in life is really drawn back to the first few years of life and how they were cared for and how they were socialized by their parents or lack of parents.
Yeah.
Right. So, and yeah, it really does, I think, require for proper parenting, like a couple of people, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, even still, so when we talk about proper parenting and it comes back to the parents, that's not to say that the blame falls on the parents.
No.
Or that the parents are solely. I know that's not what you were suggesting, but just I feel like sometimes that gets misconstrued when people talk about it. Like if you have a single parent, for example, who needs to work full time and they can't afford childcare, and their 8 or 9-year-old is home by themselves, after school for who knows how long. I mean, that's a problem in and of itself right there. And that's just the first thing I can think of off the top of my head. And that parent's in no position to be able to change that.
Right. I would even see that as potentially okay in some circumstances because it builds autonomy into the child. But it's earlier in life, I think, where, they get some deeply embedded sense of who they are or who cares about them or not, and all of that kind of shapes them on a more fundamental level, like almost like a precognitive level, like some like subconscious thing where they might be responding and sort of living out certain characteristics of that unconsciously, after the fact. I mean, I've studied psychology a little bit, right? Not to the point where I could say I'm any professional at all, but I was just profoundly interested in that. But yeah, no, that's definitely the case. There's another issue though that could be on the other side of that, where it's like you have these perfectly loving parents, but then they're coddling their kid.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, and so then they that could also retard their development, like so. It's real delicate balance.
It is, and that's parenting's not easy for that reason. Because we all love our kids. So
yeah,
that's I just say that because I feel like that's something I'm constantly aware of. I'm a father. I have a little girl, and it's like,
soon too.
I'm not. Yeah, soon too, and I'm not by any means too hard on her. And it's like, maybe should I be harder? When should I be harder on her? And it's like this fine line. And
is your wife harder on her than you are?
No, I don't think so. We're pretty much in step with each other, and we talk about it frequently and
right
how we handle her in certain things.
Sure.
And what comes up. So
sure. I mean, from the psychologists I like to listen to, they often talk about like, well, you have little hoops that they need to jump through. It's like, you set a certain standard and they need to meet that standard, and then you move the standard ahead. And so then you expect a little bit more because they're getting older, they're getting more skillful. And sometimes you need to move that bar a little faster than they're developing to give them some motivation to chase, this standard. Yeah. Whether it's potty training or something much later in life, so that's and someone needs to play that role.
Oh yeah.
But as far as single parents are concerned, so I don't talk about this frequently, but like my mother separated from my father when we moved to this country, right? I actually I almost said I'm imported from Russia.
Oh.
I was born
imported.
No, we came as refugees, right?
Okay.
We left Moscow. We immigrated through Austria and Italy and came here. I was 3. My mother left my father not long after we arrived here with my brother in tow, and then proceeded to soon work 2 jobs and go to school full time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It is amazing, and it's very commendable. I'm grateful, and I'm inspired, right, by that.
Yeah.
That's great. And then my dad re-entered my life, not long later to the point that where my memory, how it serves me, I don't remember him being absent, which is great. So and then we would sort of share the time back and forth, but that is having my mother done what she did, that was very inspiring, especially when I learned about that. I was like, wow, that's quite the thing, when I grew to understand it too. But yeah, that's
incredible.
Yeah. But as far as when did you start to get into music? How early?
Well, my mom, she had me playing piano when I was young, and probably, I don't know, I must have been single digits, like 8 or something, 7 or 8, and to her it was just a part of my education, general education, and I'm grateful for that. It's like you learn math and history and music and different subjects. Music's a part of that, and she had taken piano lessons when she was younger, and her side of the family is very musical. My grandfather was a professional drummer. My Pepe, I'm French Canadian, so yeah. It feels weird calling him grandfather because he's Pepe. But, that I wasn't into music at that time. I didn't, it was just like another subject, and I didn't like really try as hard, but it was foundational in that when I did get interested in music later, like in middle school, I had background upon which to draw, so that it was more accessible to me. And that's great, that's part of the general education at a young age, if you choose to go that route. Just like if you choose to go into engineering or something, you have mathematics behind you. Why isn't music there too?
Yeah. It's such a tragedy that that's literally disappearing from New York schools, public schools. It's like being cut out of the budget, and it's such a fundamental thing. I think it's important to the development of a child, like we were talking about before, because it's literally a part of it's the right brain, right? And that's a very important part of the brain to develop for creativity, and creativity is not just music and stuff like that. It's literally anything, right? Unless you want to, you don't want a child impaired in that.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would disagree with that, right? But yet it's still the first thing to be caught, the arts, and even before sports. We'll probably get to talking about physical activity and exercise later, but sports and physical education are extremely important.
They are.
But music is going to go before that does, and I think that's just a general enthusiasm for it amongst younger kids, and I think parents. Sports especially are much more tangible, and the positive effects are immediately evident.
Yeah, definitely. Something just funny came to my head. Imagine eSports becomes a part of school.
Wait a minute. So let me understand eSports.
Like video games.
That's what I thought you meant.
Yeah. That's something different.
Yeah. Well, music's already gone that route, right?
Yeah.
It's been, first you had Guitar Hero, and now you have that, those like play along apps, and which, I mean, they're, I'm not passing judgment on them, but it's gone there. Right?
Yeah. But imagine in a public school, like, I mean, it's funny. My generation played Oregon Trail on those colored Macs.
Yeah. Or Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? You remember that? Right? Oh, yeah. And you had to, like, input the proper DOS codes to access the game. Right? I could never do that stuff now, DOS. But we learned it.
That's so funny. Yeah. I mean, the stuff that, like, the floppy... I remember having a game on floppy disks. It was, like, on, like, a few floppy disks. And today I'm surprised that it even fit on a few floppy disks. Like, when you look at emulators of old games, right? Like, even N64 games, which were, at least in your mind when you look back, I'm like, wow, that was decent graphics for the time. Those games are like 20 megabytes.
Yeah, they're nothing. It's crazy.
It's like an MP3.
Yeah. I remember the first time it was Mario 64. It was like the first 3D game I was ever exposed to. My mind was blown as a young kid. It's like, this is amazing. You can go in all these different directions. It's not just. I don't know, it was cool.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's funny. I've had entire podcasts where I just kind of like talked about video games because it's just it can. I've had a history, let's say, in that. It's so surprising that today that became literally something that can be very profitable for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, but is it really surprising? I mean, with that much enthusiasm.
That's true.
Thinking of our generation was like the video, we're roughly the same age. I'm mid-30s.
Yeah.
You might be a little younger than I am.
I'm 33, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Our generation was like the first real video game generation, right? We had it growing up as kids, and we had like good games in the home, at home, consoles, N64, and everyone did. It was just like the thing. So is it really surprising now that, I mean, video games are just like, they've taken off and people are making, 6 digits playing video games? Probably more, right? They make.
Yeah. Some do. Millions. I mean, oh yeah. I've seen, I remember I was on Twitch, like, no, I wasn't on Twitch. I was watching a video of a Twitch stream on YouTube. How about that? Mm-hmm. And my keyboardist sent me this, and it basically, it was Link to the Past, right? Zelda being played like was that the Super Nintendo one? It was the Super Nintendo one. Okay. Being played start to finish in like something like a couple hours. and this guy exploited all of these crazy glitches where you walk into a wall at a specific angle repeatedly and then end up in like the developer zone, and then and then you just glitch and just like go to another place, and he beat the game without a sword, without ever taking the sword. So
and that's probably like a spectacle. People want to see this. Right?
During the time that elapsed in that video, they raised like something like $600,000.
Wow! You said 2 hours, right?
Yeah, 2.5 hours. Like it's so insane. It's so insane. Man. I mean, it makes you realize, if you're not totally put off by it or shocked beyond analysis, if you think about it, it's like what is money? It's just energy, and it flows to wherever attention is. Fundamentally, right? If you can generate attention in some way, I mean, we are in the attention economy, right? If you generate attention, then you can sort of, whatever it is, it could be cat videos, literally. So
I've never thought about it like that. That's absolutely what we're living in. It's like an attention economy, and money is essentially energy.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Like, people are sitting there, and they're voluntarily, I've seen people donating $500, $20, $50, $200, $1,000, $20, $800, $400, $5,000, $20, $2. Like, and
to someone playing games.
To someone playing like an old ass game, like. But
sure.
And it's not that he was even entertaining in his like speech or anything like that so much. It's kind of like, very basic, right? But I mean, people and the fact that kids these days, and I have students that are in this camp where they watch more people play video games than they play video games.
I've heard of that. Like, they don't actually play, they just watch.
They just watch. Yeah.
Because they like the person. Like, the person may not even be a good player. They might just narrate it in a certain way that it makes them feel like it's a personality they enjoy. And,
right.
But then what are they doing? I mean, they're not connecting with anyone, and they're spending hours doing this. I mean, that's just the scariest thing to me.
Yeah,
It's
no,
not
that
going
could
to
be
go
scary.
away.
No.
Yeah.
No. Hopefully it can be something where people are a little bit less passively involved and more actively involved, at least, you know. And I feel like that will be a thing as technology improves. I mean, right now, think about it, like you're on Twitch or whatnot, and people, you know, I think people could communicate with it, but it's overwhelming because it's all these people at once, right? So there are people who of a higher tier, let's say, who want a little bit more attention from their posts, will invest, and that kind of monetizes the system. You ever been on Twitch?
No, but I have a friend who, it's a thing with musicians now, and
Yeah.
I have a friend who drums on Twitch, and he was describing it to me, and it's hard for me to get my head around, like, that whole dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't. I don't think it's. I don't think it's bad. I don't think, you know, if that's the way things are going, cool. But I can't, like, get excited about that. Like, it's just, I don't know. Like with music, I started playing music because, for a lot of reasons, but one of the things that was comforting about it was because you have your instrument and yourself, and the entire world of experience is right there in front of you waiting to be discovered. And it's all there, and it's all like, it's not an introvert versus extrovert thing. It's just more understanding and, like, going inside yourself to find everything, the infinite, everything that's there, right? So, like, I love that.
It's an exploration.
Yeah, and it's very much, it's all, like, as guitar players, I do this because we're guitar players. It's like, it's all right here. The whole universe is right here, and it's just up to you to dive in. Right?
Isn't that so interesting? Sorry to cut you off. Like,
no, it's okay.
We search for the universe from within, and, like, let's say a scientist would search for the universe from without, like, try to search for it out there. But then again, it might be another within, just a larger scale, right?
Sure. Yep.
Within consciousness, within the world, the universe, whatever, right? It's but
within, not to piggyback on that, within the what you're projecting, right? Because as you discover more that's out there, it very well could just be a projection from what's within. Right.
And that's a thing. It's exploratory, right? And I think that's just a human thing, right? That we humans like to explore and to pull out from and extrapolate from all of these, you know, all this discovery, right? And that's the tradition. That's how we got to where we are. That's how we can sit in front of a camera and microphone and on, you know, at any point opposite of the world. It could be anywhere, you know. I've lived in Thailand and taught people in the States, you know. Like, the fact that that's, like, think about that in terms of 100 years ago, 200 years ago. It's
unimaginable.
It's magic. Yeah, it's just it's complete. Like, we'd be hunted.
Oh, right. Oh yeah, if we had this technology, we'd be killed.
Oh yeah.
Right, it'd be witchcraft or something.
Oh, definitely witchcraft. Yeah, unquestionable.
Satan would have revealed him. We must have sold our soul or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Isn't that a funny thing? Like, back in, like, Paganini's time, like, people thought he, like, sold his soul.
Yeah. Just the level of superstition at the time.
Oh, that's
just,
true.
Like, unbelievable.
I think that's where science started to really creep up. You know, that's when Nietzsche said that God is dead, I think.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's very appropriate, symbolically speaking.
Right.
Right.
And I mean that in the sense that, you know, that when we started to see that the potential of all this, all these enlightenment values sort of surfacing in such a way that are very, that move us ahead technologically and in many different ways, you know, and so they put a lot of things into question, including superstition itself.
Oh yeah.
And I would say, rather than superstition, because that's a negative connotation, myth in a general sense, right? And the unexplained, the metaphysical, say, right? And then, of course, every time we thought we have it all figured out, we realize, like, we don't, right?
Oh, yeah. That's another rabbit hole, though. Just that cycle of, like, flip-flopping on itself.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you push it to the edge of what the current model can describe, and then you realize it falls apart when you keep going further. I'm talking about quantum mechanics and whatnot.
Sure.
It's like, how far can that go before that falls apart as we discover more and more of what the reality of things are? I don't know much about that stuff, just enough to know that it's kind of, it seems cyclical to me.
Yeah, it definitely is. But out of all that, we got to be super grateful for, things like I said, like this, and that we can store our food, and of course there's missteps along the way, and maybe, but that goes to the territory. We always step too far and step back, and step too far and step back, and hopefully over time there's a net positive.
Yeah, well, and the human nature determines if there's a net positive, and the decisions we make along the way.
Right.
I mean, we're watching it unfold now before our eyes in so many ways.
Yeah. I think it's important more than ever to really consider virtues and values, and just like having values. So basically having an understanding of, like, treating your fellow person good, just the golden rule, essentially, right? And sticking to that, doing what you do well, being a good contributor, and just being nice to other people, just fundamentally,
being nice to other people, even if you don't understand them,
of course,
even if you don't agree with them. I mean, I know you would agree with these things, but
right.
I think this is what society, it gets lost in society. You don't have to agree with somebody. You don't have to understand somebody. You can still be nice to them, and you can still be respectful to them.
Of course.
And whatever happened to trying to understand the opposite perspective,
Right.
Without launching into the discussion on current events and all that stuff. That's just like the glaring problem with all of the dialogue.
Or lack of dialogue.
Or lack of dialogue, right.
Right.
Yeah, it's just like, it's not, I don't know. I don't want to.
I hear you.
That's a can of worms.
Oh, God, yeah. That's definitely a can of worms. That will not be opened.
Right.
But
that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But yeah, no, definitely taking personal responsibility to, in general, and to treat other people the way you want to be treated, and like they're individuals. Because, I mean, I think that's the fundamental nature of, like, who we are, right? Like, so we one of the Western values is the sovereignty of the individual, right? And that we treat people like they're like a, from a religious perspective, that they're a fragment of God, right? And that we treat them like they're holy, and every person matters, and we wouldn't contest that, that there's value to a life. And so, that we just have to remember that, but that's pretty much that. Now, on value to life and on living a valuable life, it's kind of a stretch, but I want to kind of get back to that physical education thing. So, or not just physical education, but the fact that we're also physical beings as well as mental, and school tends to focus on us being a floating head rather than a body with a head, and with the exception of a sport in the school, right? But we still need to remember, if children are like they can't sit still, and this is a common thing, hyperactive children, that there isn't something wrong with them. They're just hyperactive children, right? And just because they don't fit well in the context of sitting behind a desk in a classroom in that traditional way, doesn't mean that they're any less capable. If anything, they might be more capable in some ways, right? So I've seen that a lot. And on that, how do you I just want to kind of get a general sense of like how you work out and eat and all of that stuff. So let's kind of get into that a little bit. And how have you been taking care of yourself during the pandemic, let's say?
Well, at first, not so well.
Like all of us.
Yeah. It was like, oh, we're going to be not going anywhere for a few weeks. Oh, yeah, let's just hang out and eat like garbage and, have some drinks and a little vacation, right? And then realize it's going to go on for a while and reel it back in. But, yeah, in general, I always see myself as a work in progress, like physically. I'm not, I try to dietarily, as far as my diet goes, I try to avoid, my wife will tell you I have a sweet tooth, or I have at times over the years, but it's always a conscious thing for me to avoid, sugars or, in general though, I do. I don't eat anything like that unless it's specifically like categorized as a treat or a dessert. I drink black coffee. I don't.
Okay.
Whenever I'm shopping for food, I make sure that I'm always looking at labels to check sugar content, things like that. I care very much about keeping that out of my diet unless I choose to indulge in it. So.
Was there something specific that caused you to sort of be a little bit more, to tread carefully, or was it just kind of a conscious choice?
It was a conscious choice because I understood, I started understanding a little bit more about cancer and just not what causes cancer, but what feeds cancer. And I understood sugar has a lot to do with that, as well as, I'm nowhere near, diabetes or anything like that, but that's obviously something you wouldn't want to push towards. But it was really just like understanding some of the things that are happening to people today that weren't happening throughout history as prevalently, and looking at our diets and just trying to determine, well, what kind of choices can I make that will maybe help me to not have cancer when I'm in my 60s or 70s, to not develop dementia when I'm in my 70s or 80s, These are the things I try and think about now. I'm in my mid 30s. I really shouldn't worry about that kind of stuff, but I just feel like it starts now.
It does start now. You know what? Actually, research that I've read on, let's say, dementia and Alzheimer's and stuff, that stuff really starts in your 30s, and it doesn't show signs until decades and decades later. But the damage is done fundamentally early, before it shows any signs. And I think dementia is starting to be viewed as diabetes type 3.
Interesting.
That's interesting, right? So that I think it was, whose book was that? Might have been a Ben Greenfield book, or no, Genius Foods. I think I forgot the author's name, but Genius Foods, great book, and it discusses that at length.
Wow.
Yeah. So so definitely that's a great idea not to. So you basically avoid excesses, right? You try not to go too nuts with that stuff and overindulge too much.
Yeah, or at least be well aware of what I'm actually consuming. So, because a lot of times sugars, they sneak by because they're in everything, so I try and just be aware if I want to, have a piece of cake or whatever it is. It's like, I know that's the only place I'm going to be eating sugar today or over the course of a number of days, because I know it's nowhere else.
It's intentional.
Because I've paid attention to it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so you can kind of like monitor. And then like in tandem with that is the whole bread thing. I try and just make sure that I'm no more than like one serving of bread a day, you know, if that. You
Right.
know? So if I know that we're going to be having pasta at night, I don't have my toast in the morning.
That's
you know?
good. Yeah.
So
You keep a balance that way. Yeah.
I try to. I've been lately. I've just been letting it fly with meat because my dad got me a grill.
Oh, what kind of grill?
Man, it's it's a gas grill, you know, outside.
Nice.
But like I never had one, and it's a transformative experience.
Oh yeah. Are you using? Are you cooking organic meat, or how are you going about it?
Well, yeah, if it's red meat, grass fed.
Yeah.
And generally, I don't care so much about. You know, I like grain fed chicken. That's
Yeah. With chicken, is not as important. It's really critical with the red meat that it's organic.
Yeah, or at least I care about the diet, the grass fed.
Yeah.
But what does it mean for red meat to be organic?
Well, that's pretty much it. That's the grass fed. Yeah. Because that would mitigate a lot of issues. Yeah. It's fundamentally a different food because of what the animal eats, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if the animal doesn't graze on grass as it's supposed to, then it just eats like, you know, corn and all this like crap, and then they give them antibiotics, and it's just a mess, right? And so, and also the stress of in the animal is going to come down in the meat. I mean, that's been known for a very long time. It's known, you know, from the spiritual kind of side, but it is apparent because lactic acid goes into the meat and all of that. But yeah, so organic meat is definitely it's so interesting because like grain-fed cow is not a health food. Organic cow is like actually a health food. It could be used as such, right? But context is important, because if you have too much carbs with that, then that can be inflammatory. But on its own, it's actually pretty good, or with some vegetables and such.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So in combination with the carbs, it can be
a
problem.
Yeah. So it's like food combining is an art in itself, you know. It's like what foods go well with what foods. I think if someone's going to do kind of something general, a general rule of thumb, if they're an omnivore, is like fat with protein is fine, carbs and protein is fine, but fat with carbs is not a great idea.
It sounds kind of gross, anyways. Fat with carbs. It's kind of weird.
Ice cream.
Oh yeah, you know what? Last few times I've been getting, we go to this. My wife's always like, "Hey, let's go get ice cream with Nora." I'm like, "Okay." So we go.
I love ice cream, though. I can't help myself.
Oh, man, I don't like. I'm not. I'm never crazy about it. Yeah, and we go and I get it anyways because like we're gonna. And I always feel horrible afterwards. And last time we went to get ice cream, they gave me more than they normally give me, and I ate the whole thing. And I swear I felt sick all night.
Oh.
And it's not like a milk thing or a dairy thing, because you know I eat cheese all the time. I love cheese, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like ice cream, man, it's just not gelling with me.
Yeah,
it's weird.
I hear that. I mean, it's something that, you know, just going back to childhood, I don't have it that frequently anymore, but I'm doing something very weird right now. I'm in the process of making a little documentary or video where I gain weight and then I lose it, right? So I'm intentionally gaining weight right now.
Okay.
I'm going to gain maybe another like 14 pounds or something like that. Yeah, so I'm going to go up to 200. I haven't been to 200 in like, oh my God, since I was like 22, 23 or something. Like maybe 10 years. And I'm going to go down to like 170 after that, right? I'm like in a mid 180s right now. But in a healthy kind of, yeah. So the point of the whole exercise, let's say, is I mean, some people could think, oh yeah, it's so you can binge on foods and stuff, and I'm not going to say no. But but I've sort of already like learned all this kind of how to diet, and not only learned it but applied it, like without a problem. And just learned how my body works well with different modalities, and with fasting, with keto, with all these different ways of losing weight. I just want to give people a sort of like how I would approach this situation, and also as I'm gaining, I can talk about in the videos, and I have been in the little clips I've been recording of like, okay, well, this is an unhealthy weight, a way to gain weight. And this is a healthy way to gain weight, because some people do need to gain, whether it is they're trying to gain for, vanity reasons, or for even just for health. People who are genuinely underweight, and they struggle to eat enough or eat foods that would kind of put weight on them. So, yeah, there's a lot of ways of doing that, and of both of gaining and losing. And I think it'll be an interesting thing to to go through.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, but I'll be honest, like I had bowls of ice cream yesterday. And I woke up at the same weight as I was like yesterday morning. I was like I was laughing to myself. It's like I'm trying to lose weight and I gain it. I try to gain weight and I don't lose it. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, one thing that happened to me back earlier in the year, on this, I did a fast, and I fast pretty frequently. But I did like a longer fast. I did like, I don't know, 6 days, something like that. And I think I reset my metabolic rate. Now, people think that you would slow down your metabolism, but for months after that, I didn't really gain that much weight, and even when I just let go, like my body stayed at a healthy weight. Like it was actually my set point changed, my weight set point changed, I feel. Yeah. So I'm not going to, anyone who's trying to diet, anything we discuss here, obviously consult your physician, your dietitian, whatever. Consult a professional before taking on any dietary program, right? But
that's something that you tried.
But yeah, I am a fan of experimentation, because we have bioindividuality. Something different works for everybody.
Yeah.
But we all are human, and we should try the things that are the most effective and healthy, right? And as far as cancer and other debilitating conditions that we can develop later in life, or as a result of certain health practices or lack thereof, fasting is definitely one of those modalities that can really help people across the board, and that isn't talked about too much. It's starting to be spoken about more. Intermittent fasting has become quite popular, and I'm happy for that, and hopefully it doesn't become a meme of itself.
Oh yeah.
Because it becomes cliche a little bit, and then people start to talk against it to market their own thing. But fundamentally, it's something that we've been doing for millennia. We've been doing it for a very, very long time. Non-intentionally many times, but also intentionally. If you look at all of our spiritual texts, almost every major religion has fasting practices built in, both for spiritual liberation, but also for physical healing. And it's so interesting that so much is healed by not eating, by just not taking in anything,
Well, eating, I understood at one point that eating at any point in time is inflammatory.
Yeah.
And so if you think about what you eat, if you eat foods that are less likely to be inflammatory, you're going to tax your body less as you eat. So if you don't eat at all, then you're not subjecting yourself to any of that for,
right,
a certain amount of time.
And
we have to eat, but
yeah, but you're also, you know what autophagy is?
No.
So autophagy is very interesting. It's like this automated cell death that the body literally kills off, eats its bad cells, right? Cells that can become dysfunctional, and that mitochondria stopped working in, and they're just like absorbing nutrients but not performing, and so we feel sluggish even though we have enough nutrition. So if we get rid of those, then we perform better. We make space for new cell growth and all that. So there's all these fancy words, and cell apoptosis and all that. But the point of the matter is that it's just a healthy practice, whether you know what's going on or not. But I'm so much like a proponent for learning about nutrition. You know, I think people should be educated on this, and it's one of the things that are really lacking in our education system, and in just a general educating each other or staying informed about things, you know, because unfortunately, you know, a lot of the foods that we've grown to love in this country don't serve us in the long term.
Right. Well, and on that very topic, another thing I discuss with my wife is the availability of healthy options. Not only the education, but the availability. So if you look at people who are in lower socioeconomic status having more health issues, and then maybe they don't have the ability to travel to a grocery store or something, or if they do, they can't get their groceries home. And these are just things that pop up. And I know some supermarkets have programs now that they will actually, if you have a certain amount of groceries, you can get a free ride home. So you could take the bus there and then get a ride home, which is great. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's this very interesting thing I just want to chime in that I heard recently about like supermarkets in areas, in more poverty-stricken areas. There's this crazy thing where if you go into one of these grocery stores, supermarkets, they won't have the healthy options available. They're just going to have, you know, like the, you know, sugar-laden, fat-laden foods, processed foods, and just the cheapest versions of them. And it's you'd be the cheapest thing you can buy, and it's so crazy. A water is $1, but for 50 cents you can get a tropical fantasy. So
there's so many more ingredients, right?
It's like it's like 50 ingredients, and it's like, you know, 50 grams of sugar, and you know, and kids just go for it. You know, I remember when I was a kid, we used to go to the store and buy these barrels, like these like little quarter drinks. It's like, what's
those things?
What's the flavor? Purple.
Yeah, purple. It's not even grape. It's just like a sweet water, but it's purple.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember those. Didn't they have like a little foil top on?
Yep.
Yeah.
I used to buy the green one because I just love the color.
Well, it wasn't lime or anything. Probably.
Oh no! It was. I don't think they even bothered. If they did, we never looked.
It was sweet and green.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's all it needs to be, right?
Yeah.
I mean, kids are simple. Unfortunately for them, I mean, we could laugh about this, but I mean, there's a quite deeply cynical nature of it. I mean, the fact that these companies know this, they know who they're marketing to.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, or whether it's the drinks that they're going to see at the store, or Count Chocula cereal they're going to see on TV during the commercial breaks of their cartoons, all right?
Mm-hmm.
They're gonna infiltrate into the minds of these kids, and they're gonna go out and buy the stuff, right? And you know, they're gonna get them onto it. But you know, I'm getting slightly sidetracked because, like, you know, I was chiming in on what you were saying there, but also the fact that it's fundamentally a what's it called? It's a problem in socioeconomically, like in neighborhoods that are poor, essentially, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So
because we're having this discussion, and it's like something that there are choices that we have the ability to make, and we have options, but not everyone has those options.
Mm-hmm.
That's a huge problem in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe they don't have the options, and they don't have the resources. You know, if you don't have money, and a $1 burger costs you like $1.07 or whatever at McDonald's, it's like, that's dinner. It could be, you know. I mean, if I went through when I was touring early on in one of the bands I was in. My thing was like the 25-cent cup of ramen from Walmart, and I'd go in and, you go to the gas station and they had the little orange thing for the hot water, and I'd go in and just pour it in my cup, and then I'd have the same metal fork that I just carried around, and like I'd rinse it off, and like that was like my like midday when I'm really hungry, I'd eat that, so it's like I mean I didn't come from I'm not poor. My family certainly isn't, but like at that time in my life I was making choices like that. Some people are in a position where they have to make like the most economic food choices possible,
right?
And so they gravitate towards things like that,
right?
Where they gravitate towards just like, I remember I used to be in ancient history, I used to be a school teacher, and I'd hear stories of we'd have families and the kids, and they'd get a pizza on Monday, a big pizza on Monday, and that was dinner for the week. Like every night,
wow.
They just chip away at the pizza, and I hear stories like that. I'm like, this is horrible,
Yeah.
Like this happens. It's what's going on.
Right. What's interesting is like and this comes back to the education. If you understand, say, how nutrition works to some degree, right? If if let's say school had a class on that, which you would think you'd learn to eat or cook better yet. I mean, I've seen some very interesting programs around the world, like in Japan, during the lunch period, you don't just sit and eat as a kid, you actually help cook it.
That's great.
Yeah, I don't know if that's across the board, but this is definitely something that's instantiated in some schools there. But like, let's say we had more education on how to eat, then what can happen essentially is that if we are like we go through a hard time where we don't have enough food, we don't have enough money to like eat in a very wholesome way, at least we can understand what we should be eating in that circumstance, because just because you don't have enough money doesn't mean you can't eat in a healthy way. It's just that you just need to understand, like, well, I don't have much money, but can I go and buy sardines? Yeah. Like that's a very healthy food, and it's not expensive, and it's extremely nutritious, right? And more nutritious.
I love sardines, by the way.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great. Something like that, like you can live off of sardines alone, literally. Like that is, and not only will you'll be healthy from it, of course you should, get a sardine that isn't like, that's lower in mercury and whatnot. But honestly, with the crap that's being consumed, on average, instead of that, mercury is your least concern, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I understand.
You know what I'm saying? So, there's that. Eggs. Oh my God. Eggs are like extremely, extremely healthy food, right? And again, you could live on eggs, right? So it's these things that when we understand, when we understand that eating something like we could eat in a way that is inexpensive, right? It's cost efficient, right? If we're in the circumstance that we need to do that. But the education is the problem, I think, fundamentally. If they don't know,
absolutely, then
yeah.
Right. How can you make the right choice if you don't know what the right choice should be?
Right. Yeah.
Especially when there are all these tantalizing things that are designed to lure you in,
Yeah, and also numb your taste buds to anything that's like natural, right? They're so saturated.
That's a fascinating thing too, is when you start trending on certain types of foods, you start to crave those foods more. Be it garbage or healthy food. Like if you're on a trend where you like really like to eat just take sugar again, for example. And I've experienced this myself. If eating sugar regularly, you want to more, and it's just it's not super sweet, right? But if you go for a long period of time without eating sugar, then all of a sudden you have something that is sweet. It's disgusting. It's way too sweet.
In its normal quantities, yeah. Like I remember trying to have like a candy bar or something like that, or a piece of it, after like not eating something like that for a long time and going through a lot of fasting. It's just, it's so overwhelming. It's like, yeah, like you said, disgusting.
Yeah, because you're not conditioned to like that anymore, you know?
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Same thing goes with alcohol. If you've ever, you know, sometimes on tour we have alcohol regularly. And, you know, it's like just a thing.
I did pretty good on that tour. Like I didn't, yeah. I smoked up a few times, but that was the extent of it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
well, that's cool. That's probably not as damaging to your body.
Probably not, no.
But yeah, alcohol is one of those things you just kind of like, you know, you develop a bit of a tolerance. You don't experience any of the effects of it really as if you're drinking regularly. And then if you don't drink for a while, you just don't really have any desire to drink because it's just what you're now conditioned to be, you know.
We're habitual creatures.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that the habitual thing, and I feel like I could just like, one topic is just inspiring and leads to other tangents. But
go for it.
No, I thought about this recently. We can be so habitual that we can desire situations or things that are uncomfortable or things that maybe we don't like. So I remember living in this like really dingy apartment, and it's always like, we got out of there, it was pretty gross. There were always like different bugs coming in. And
where was this?
It was a basement apartment in Central Mass. You know, and it's like me and my wife were out there. She was living in Rhode Island at the time, or working in Rhode Island, and I was working in Western Mass. So we like picked a central location to live. It was before we were married. And you know, I did a lot of practicing in this like extra room there, and I hated the apartment. The only reason I liked it was because I was there with her, but everything about it just sucked. And then, you know, we moved out, and then it just was I had built up such a habit of being in that room and practicing and having just experience in that room. I missed the room. I missed being there. I missed all of that. And that speaks to how habitual we can be, you know?
Yeah.
And it's kind of weird when you think about it.
Yeah. You know, I speaking of like living spaces and well, I've lived in this particular, I just kind of moved in February. I moved upstate in New York to Poughkeepsie, which was such a crazy move. It's such a big change. I lived in Brooklyn before. Yeah. And I moved in February. How's that for timing? I didn't even know this whole thing was coming, and I just happened to evade it. So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, I'm happy for you.
Thank you. But you know, yeah. I'm actually contemplating this, and for those of you watching this episode later, if you see me doing this, then you know this is when I was thinking about it. If I'm not, then I'm not. But so this is what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about, you know, this whole tiny home movement.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking about
that?
I'm really thinking about that. I'm thinking about being mobile. I'm thinking about a tiny home that I can literally latch onto a back of a car, you know, and move it from time to time and just kind of live in that way. Because I realize I could be more minimalist. I don't really need too much, and I've been thinking about that with my gear here. I really don't need a lot of the stuff. Like, what do I need? Like, I need just one 7-string electric, my acoustic, and some amp simulation. Currently, I'm using this XFX3, which is wonderful. But do I even need that? You know, I might not, or I might switch to the what's that? The floor one now, like the FM3 or whatever.
Is it a fractal?
Yeah, yeah. So this is a new fractal floor unit, which is
okay.
It's kind of like the XFX3, but on the floor.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So that if you were gigging with the XFX3, you'd need a foot controller, anyways, right?
I have the foot. Yeah, I have the FS12 or whatever. So I would just maybe keep this one and get the 3, then that would sort of give me 3 additional buttons on the floor. And then I have this as well, so it, that I'm completely taken care of, and I don't need this big outboard unit, so that's just one less thing, I'm running off a laptop, and
right.
Yeah, so I don't know. I've been thinking about that. I've been watching lots of videos. I like the whole prospect of it.
Well, especially nowadays. I mean, if you're talking about living below your means,
yep,
intentionally, minimalistically, being mobile.
Yeah,
I mean, those are all things that are going to help you navigate society in the next few years for sure. I mean, if you need to, let's say you're in a COVID hotspot and you can get out, and go somewhere,
or whatever hotspot, yeah, like whatever's happening at the time.
Yeah, and then just with everything happening with the economy and just musicians, I mean, if you can keep your overhead just your lifestyle overhead down, that's an asset in and of itself.
I teach online, so it works.
Yeah,
it works. And I, right before I started this interview today, I was like, I just had this idea. I was like, what if I literally take this show on the road? And yeah, and like I literally set up a studio like to interview people in person inside the whatever it ends up being, the little house or bus or whatever. You can buy a school bus for $3,500.
Is it? It's not brand new though.
No, it's not brand new. No, it's got miles and years on it, but still, I mean,
well, a diesel engine will take you quite a ways, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, 35 sounds good, but I would want to know how much life it has left on it.
Well, if it's only 3,500, then maybe at least at that point you can put some. You can repair it a little bit, or but if the range is generally low from what I've seen, like mostly under 10 grand.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
okay.
So then like you can spend a few dozen grand just literally renovating the inside of it and making it into like kind of like a tour bus thing. Yeah. Or and you could live in that. So it could be. I'm thinking how, like, with the setup, I've been sort of, like, taking notes from all these different builds. People are so efficient. It's so amazing. So these, like, little houses, they, like, build storage into the stairs going into the loft area where they sleep. And, the kitchen, the way it's set up, it's just very efficient. Washer, dryer in one unit. Even a dishwasher in some of these places, right? I mean, I wouldn't need that. But still, that's very... It's very interesting, and they can house people. They can they can entertain. They can open and make a porch.
Oh yeah, like they're expandable.
Yeah,
like certain portions of it could.
Sure.
If it was parked.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Like there's lots of different, and then there's people who are very minimalist about it. The only turnoff for me is the say like the sewage system, how that and apparently it's not that hard to deal with, but it is a thing to think about.
It's just like an RV at that point with the sewage, I think, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you have to? It's got a tank, and you have to dump it somewhere.
Yeah.
That's
like twice a month or something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not too bad. That's not too bad. Like I would do it.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I could literally migrate in this like during the winter like a bird. Just go down south and spend my. Summers in in New York or New Jersey or whatever, and spend my winters in like San Diego or something, or Tennessee or whatever. Just like I can move around. You don't
have to like determine that now either.
No.
It could just be on a whim.
Yeah. I can exactly like you said. Like I can either be evading something or I could be going towards something.
Yeah.
Like how cool would it be if I just like had like a nice little mobile situation where it's inviting and, I just roll through on NAMM or something and just people like come and hang out,
Yeah. Do
like,
some interviews.
Oh yeah. Like right in my studio. Yeah. Like my mobile studio. I could literally do the interviews. Like that would be a very good place to fish. I mean, before I started this show, I was at the NAMM show the past 3 years, but I was at the NAMM show. But the previous year, 2019, that's when I was like finding my first guests to be on the show, and that was like the best place to look, And for those people who are like trying to start something related to music, I strongly recommend get your shit together, get yourself to the NAMM show somehow, and that's a very good place to launch from, because and introduce yourself as who you are trying to be, not who you think you are now. And then walk into that role kind of thing, right? So I was like, okay, I want to have a podcast. No, I have a podcast coming, right? And, and this is what it's about, right? And so, people need to be able to talk about their ideas, I think,
Yeah.
So let's kind of go in the entrepreneurship route for a little bit. It's releasing your own album it's an effort. Like, did you release it as a solo? Rather, is it supported by a label, or is it sort of independent?
It's independent. It's my own. I mean, it's my own label, which is just me.
Great.
So, yeah. I mean, I'm essentially doing everything a label would do.
Okay.
So probably and more, but
how are you going about that?
Well, I mean, it starts with recording. I do all the engineering and producing and mixing, and then I have a mastering engineer I send it to. I have, and this. I mean, it's different. It's usually I always try and use Phil Magnati for mastering. He's excellent, and he's nice enough to work with me. So I'm lucky to have him available. So I always go to him. As far as artists, I've done artwork in the past myself. I hired my friend Karen Bagchi to do the art on my latest record, and he did an excellent job. We used some photos that were taken by my friend Peter Petrovsky from Poland. So it's like I bring some friends into it.
Sure.
But then as far as the release goes, I take care of all the publishing and distribution and all the registrations on my own. And then I worked with PR this time, which was a huge step for me. I've never done that in the past.
How did you approach that?
Well, again, a little bit of networking and finding someone who was into what I'm doing and willing to work with me. So
yeah, I mean, you could be the sole connector of all the dots, as you are.
That's essentially what a label does, right? So I'm the artist, but I'm also running all the logistics, and including, I mean, digital distribution is cool because there's so many services that can take care of that for us now.
Oh yeah.
But then as far as physical distribution, I just handle all that, which is kind of an undertaking, if I'm, especially in the beginning when I'm doing pre-sales and I'm moving enough CDs. I mean, it's like all day, just getting orders together, and it's a lot. So
I remember we self-released our first record, and so we were very involved in that, mailing CDs and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to have a label, because there are just things that I think labels can do for you that you can't do for yourself. I mean, I'm doing everything.
What do you think that is?
I think it's kind of associating you with an audience. So certain labels have certain types of acts, certain types of bands, not just like one homogenous type or anything like that. But I think fans know that they're fans of bands on certain labels, or they at least may not go to that label for their music. But I can remember back, like when I was younger, I mean, Inside Out, Metal Blade, Magna Carta, even Roadrunner Records, Prosthetic Records. You know, the stuff that was coming out on those labels was all killer, and I knew that's where I could find new bands, and I did. And so just like by being associated with different acts, it kind of helps your music to like network itself.
Yeah. There's a certain that I totally agree. That's the association alone.
Yeah,
is helpful. Yeah,
but
like
when you're, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like let's say you get on like Favored Nations or something like that. You know, like as a solo guitar player, it's a very respectable place to be. That's Vi's label, right? Yeah,
and people are gonna hear it because I mean, who isn't amazing on Favored Nations?
Right.
You know, all
like,
those players are incredible.
Yeah,
you know, so I mean, I'm gonna check them out. You know, but when you do it yourself, you're just kind of like, it's a big ocean out there, and you're just like a fish kind of swimming by yourself, hoping to find people. Even if you bring in resources, you know, you have PR helping you, and you've got, you know, networking, and it's still not as good as if you can like kind of, I think, attach yourself with a school of like-minded fans, and it's really hard to find that on your own. So
right.
I that's one thing I don't think I can really do for myself, and a label could do.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because it's like, if you have a platform, then you're in a very different position. You know, like a really large platform. When I went to the Petrucci camp, the second one.
Cool.
Yeah, which is really, really cool. Yeah, lots of fun.
I love him. I'm such a fan.
Oh yeah, no, I'm a big fan of John. And you know, we've spoken about him coming on the show. It's just a scheduling thing, and you know, just we'll make it work eventually, right? And I look forward to that, right? But at his at that camp, you know, one of the instructors in this one was Tosin, right? Tosin Abasi. And so I sat in on one of Tosin's music business kind of classes, and he spoke about leverage, and it's about how building social media following today would really give you leverage. And the example that he gave was bargaining, let's say, with a manager, that he bargained with a manager and got the rate that he wanted because he had access to his following. You know, because we have this access to our following, we could use that as leverage against any relationships, any kind of deals that we make with people. Because look, I have the audience, right? I don't have to go to you. You know,
right.
And so you know,
then
you have others compete for you.
Go to them,
right? Well, in some cases it would be beneficial, right? But you need them a lot less at that point, right? And it's more supplementary. And so, and I think that's just the most beautiful aspect of the modern age in what we have going. And there are negative aspects, of course. Like, so around 2000, you started to have like the death of selling music, right? Just fundamentally, like, you know, that ceased to continue as a major form of income for an artist. And it started to become secondary to, say, touring and merchandise and things like that. And then labels tightened their grip even more on artists of like with 360 deals and such, and try to kind of grab a hold of anything that they can. And so they became more greedy out of necessity to stay alive, because they can't make their music in the same way anymore, or rather their money in the same way anymore. And then, you know, when social media really started to pick up, like the first examples of this, the early times, I think Trent Reznor really had a big following and access to that following, you know, and I think he was a pioneer in that, you know, he offered things directly to his audience without the need of representation, and just being on his own kind of thing, right? And then later came like social media, and people started to get big followings on, say, MySpace, and then Facebook, Instagram, and so on. Then again, yeah, you have that leverage, and you can market directly to your audience, and you can go beyond music and say offer like unique merchandise, subscription services, and all kinds of different things to supplement your career. So it's an interesting time to be in that way, right? So it's just the shifting of the tide.
Yeah, but if you look at, I see exactly what you're saying. But if you look at both the examples you used, Trent Reznor and Tosin Abasi, both of them, well, Trent was on a major label with 9 Inch Nails early on, and that probably propelled him to have the audience that he has, and then he could, move away from that, the label,
right?
Or at least having that sort of support, he could do it more on his own. And Tosin, very much in the same way, started off on Prosthetic Records.
That's true.
And then I think went to Sumerian and.
But let's take somebody like Andy James, right?
Mm-hmm.
Andy James made it on YouTube first, and then he branched out of YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So he gave some real value on there, gave some quality stuff, and people started to follow him, and and he did pretty all right. He's doing all right for himself.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's talk about. I'm interested because I've had this conversation with other guitar friends. The whole YouTube phenomenon, with musicians especially. What if you look at, and this is not by any means a positive or negative critique of any musicians or where they come from at all, but take players like Tosin, for example. I learned of him from the first Animals as Leaders record.
Mm-hmm.
I knew those songs. They're great songs. They came out on a label, and I didn't learn of him from a technical video on YouTube or a viral video of anything. I knew his music first. And again, this is not to say that put YouTubers in a specific category or label people in a certain category, but a lot of the players that emerged from YouTube, I don't know their songs. I don't know their albums. Whereas like players that purely come from labels, it's like the music comes first. Yeah. And then all of the videos and all the other cool stuff like follows to kind of like support that.
Right.
So like Andy, I don't, he's incredible. I've never heard him play anything that I don't like.
Very tasteful player.
Yeah. But I mean, and it's my own fault because I haven't investigated his music, but I know his playing first. I don't know his music.
Right.
You know what I'm kind of getting at? And he might have amazing songs out there, but it's just that's not the first thing that I'm exposed to.
I think that's just you're right. And I think it's due to the fragmentation of the medium, right? That like the way that you hear him is just like in these small, like let's say excerpts, small licks and stuff that he's doing as a guest. Like he's very spread out as a musician, right? And whereas somebody like Tosin was very focused as a band guitar player, with concrete music that is being promoted, and like that is a very direct kind of connotation. But just being a YouTuber or something like that is like being an opportunist, in that like you're just like an entrepreneur, just kind of throwing things on the wall constantly. Until something kind of sticks, or things stick little by little, and then you just grow and grow this audience. I think he will emerge with some seminal work, right? And others like him have. I just can't bear anyone in mind right now. But the idea is like the medium sort of requires that sort of like feeding, if you would, just giving these tiny little clips and like, lessons and all this stuff to sort of like build your name. And now that you're within sight of others, right, then you can take your time and release something, great. And there's a lot of great Instagram and YouTube players and stuff in that camp.
For sure.
Yeah. Like another player it kind of comes to top of mind is just this crazy technical It's crazy technique on this guy, Steven Toronto. Do you know who that is?
No.
So he plays Tosin's guitars. I think he's an endorser of Abasi guitars.
Okay.
That's a subject in and of itself. But like having a guitar company, brilliant.
Oh yeah, it made total sense for him.
It did. No, because his design is brilliant.
It was the logical step for him.
It is the logical step, but I just admire it on such a level as an entrepreneur. Like it's kudos, right?
Yeah.
And really beautiful instruments too. I got to witness those at NAMM. I got to jam out on one a little bit, and they play very well. Very well built, right? So I'd urge everyone to check out Abasi Concepts. Those are nice. Little plug for him. So yeah, but the idea is that like this guy Steven Toronto, he's like one of those players who's just such a monster, and he can't be ignored when you see him play. And I think it goes to I think it's important to talk about the quality in which you release your content if you're online, if you can afford it, to have something that's presentable. Like people do well when they have like very nice production. You know,
of course, yeah.
You know, like Angel Vivaldi, right? That's like just the scale at which he produces his content is amazing. Like it's like film, you know.
It's like thriller level stuff.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. So
he had some video where he was like doing this whole choreography thing with background dancers and things. I was watching. I was like, this is intense. Like,
yeah.
What guitar player does this? You know, that sets him apart.
It's exactly. You have to figure out a way to distinguish yourself, right?
Yeah.
Some players, it's literally they're playing, you know, and they can have the crappiest videos, but if you play like Guthrie or something, then, you know, that that it's just like your playing is just so ridiculous that it can carry it, right? And it's because your playing can carry it, not because you can just get away with bad quality. It like, you know.
Oh yeah.
You know, in a day and age where everyone has like, you know, some high end phones and things like that, it's expected that you're just not, if you're not putting some quality out there, you're obviously being lazy about it, and you know, you're showing you're. I think there's a subtext. It's like, hey, this is not as worth checking out, right? It's like I'm kind of shy with what I have. I think that might be in there, right? Because and some people will just literally take offense to it, like, oh, this is kind of crap quality or something like that. I don't really judge things in that way, but it is a little annoying when it's like you have a great player and it just sounds like a tin can, like, you know. So it's important to do that. Anyway, I digress. So this Steven Toronto guy, he has an album, right? And I think he's working on another album, and I've heard it. It's ridiculous, right? It's amazing work, and people do make reference to it in the comments of his social media, and so yeah, there's a chance for people to work independently, but I do see the value in partnering up with a community of other artists in a label, in a way, right? And sort of associating yourself with a group of people rather than trying to kind of lone star it. There's value in that, and there's no shame in it either. It's like the people who are like self-taught and being like proud of it, you know, like it's like there's nothing wrong with having a teacher here and there, you know, like there are things that people sort of like unnecessarily independent about.
Yeah, and also more so than just the community of a label. I mean, the label is going to have infinitely more resources.
That's true.
Than you would have, you know, on your own. So, right. I mean, there's that aspect of it too. But then it has to make sense. It has to be a mutually beneficial thing. So,
of course,
you have to, like you mentioned with the leverage and the following, it's like you kind of have to build all that on your own, and then the label is a supplementary partnership, like you described.
Right.
But if you have all that at that point, is the label even really necessary?
Right.
So that goes back to the whole abandonment of artist development that doesn't exist anymore. It used to exist, you know. And I'm not going to pretend I know what I'm talking about here, but I noticed in the 90s especially, artists were coming out, bands were coming out, and they had to have some sort of, following, some sort of reason for the label to bring them on. But labels took part in artist development and taking bands and bringing them into the mainstream, and we had such diversity. If you turn on the radio in the 90s, the bands you were hearing were so diverse. I mean, you could hear Tool, you could hear Faith No More, you could hear Pearl Jam, you could hear, just the list goes on. Primus. I mean, these bands sound nothing like each other.
Korn, yeah, like
Korn.
yeah.
The list goes on.
Oh
yeah, massive bands. And then I think that was kind of a product of that model. And nowadays, it feels a little homogenized, a little, because artists, I don't think they're doing it intentionally, but it's all just like the shiny it's kind of like the shiny object syndrome. Like, and I'm not accusing any artist of doing this, but just the general trend, the big picture trend. It's like, this is super cool. And I mean, we saw it with Gent.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
This is like the thing. Everybody do this. And
right.
we have tours and fans and followings, and there's a new band and it's like, it's what happened in the 80s with like the whole hair metal thing.
Oh yeah.
It was the same exact thing. It was like,
right.
everyone do this. And then it pulled back. It was the 90s was a little bit more, it was more dynamic,
Sure.
And now I feel like we're kind of at the threshold where we're coming out of that, like, everything is kind of going in one direction. Now it feels like it just can't go there anymore. Everyone's, if you look at just guitar music, everyone's, gented enough, shredded as fast as they could enough, like something. You're seeing post-rock get real big now. It's got to expand back out into a much more diverse landscape, I think. I'm not saying that's what's happening. These are some ideas I've been thinking about and exploring.
Sure. No, I totally see that. I see what you're saying. Gent definitely did that. But yeah, your observations there are valid. We did kind of, I think throughout the history of music, we've had these kind of modes of where things got homogenized, as you say, and then things sort of broke out of that. I wanted to think that progressive music is immune to that, but it wasn't, because Gent was in that category.
Well, I wanted to ask you, because you're obviously really into progressive music as I am too. What does progressive rock or progressive metal by definition mean to you? And is it really still progressive? Do you really still think it's progressive?
That's a good question.
Or is it just a style that is now just a style?
Right. I think the name is it's a misnomer in that like it does fall into these tangents, right, from time to time. Whether it's like there's throughout the history of it, like it fell into these pockets, right? Whether from my entrance into it, there was Dream Theaterism, right, and then Gentism, right?
yeah.
Right, and there's these like directions that it goes, or Toolism prior, maybe, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and so yeah, I feel like it's I feel like the health of prog as a genre, dating back to, say, like, maybe even like later Beatles and like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Genesis, yes, kind of, and then as it evolved and Rush and all of that, and so it tends to get stuck in these places sometimes, right? Some bands sort of live there, right? And it's sad if a band lives in a style of another band.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
right? Which is why we, as much as we're fans of Dream Theater, obviously, we try not to be Dream Theater as much as like, yeah, I mean, if you date back to early Infinite Spectrum, like circa 2007, 8, you know, like me and my bass player are both playing, like he's playing John Mayong's bass. I'm playing the JP7 Music Man, right? And we're basically writing, you know, the next Scenes from a Memory, like that. Like that's where we were, and that you know, because we were just so excited to meet each other and work on that kind of stuff. But then you know, you allow it to go other places, right? But of course, this is anecdotal. But as you asked me a question about the general state of the style, and but I'll continue on my own journey to kind of get to that, right? So we realized that, well, we started to have different elements emerge, and we rather than being like, this isn't prog, right, we went with them, right? Like, for example, like introducing the drama element, which is, I mean, progressive metal and progressive music is kind of dramatic in its sense, but we took it in a direction we call the prog drama, which was that, like, our first album was a concept album, of course, right?
No, right.
Yeah.
Another progism.
That's definitely a progism. I seen a funny video recently a friend sent me of, like, you know, the typical prog fan, and I like fell into like probably like 8 out of 10 of the cliches. Like, oh yeah, I've said that. Oh yeah, I've done that. Yeah. It's so funny, but. And it's problematic when a music that prides itself on its, you know, not getting stuck in some place and kind of continuing to evolve, that it does have these like elements of, like, you know, these recurring elements. But at the same time, that's just a snapshot of where it is. If you zoom out, you know, even a decade or something, then you could start to see some kind of evolution in it. But sometimes it does get tangential, you know, for a few years.
yeah
like the whole Skrillex thing when that happened to like electronic music, the what is that, dubstep, right?
Oh yeah.
So I've seen that incorporated in prog in some sense. In some cases it was pretty interesting. But anyway, my point is, like, okay, so we took this in this prog drama direction. We had voice actors on our first record. And, you know, we also took seriously these instrumental sections instead of kind of going off on these, like, you know, these 5-minute instrumental sections in the middle of the song. It would be sort of intentional, where it's like, okay, this instrumental section represents this part of the story. It's like everything it makes sense, right? And at least it follows the arc of this. It was more like a Broadway show or something like that. Right, where it sort of would follow the narrative a little closer, and so it's a little bit more intentional and less, dare I say, masturbatory. Like, so it goes places, but with reason. But anyway, if someone listens to us, they can hear more of what we do than we can, because we think we're just doing the same thing. Right, we think we're doing something unique, but then again, we you know, someone else would be like, oh, that's typical Infinite Spectrum, and we'd be like, what does that even mean to, you know, just because it's hard to see what you're doing. But I'm really kind of taking this long way around. So I'll answer your question. Like, yeah, what progressive metal means to me, or progressive music, let's say. The way I explain it to somebody else, because, you know, we always have this conundrum of, like, trying to explain what you listen to. If you listen to prog a lot, if you try to explain that to somebody, it's like, oh, Dream Theater, is that rock music? And you tell them yes, but no, or you don't even know how to answer these things. So this is the way I sort of approach explaining my music or prog or whatever to someone else. I say, we use different styles of music, like dynamics within the music, within a particular song or something like that.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And I think it's a little bit more genuine in its in that explanation, where it's just like we're not afraid to use styles of music, to paint a broader picture, than might typically be done in the context of some, hard rock or metal, like, just basic hard rock and stuff like that. That we'll get jazzy with it, we'll get goofy. There'll be more humor, there'll be more expansion of, like, lyrical themes. And so hopefully we continue to explore, like, a wide gamut of topics, musically and topically. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Interesting.
That's how I
like
view
that.
it.
I like that.
Right. But it tends to, we tend to kind of listen to each other, unfortunately. Well, not unfortunately, right? We should, support our fellow musician, of course, especially our fellow prog artists, just because what we do is a little avant-garde, and, we're not a large community. And so, yeah, no, but I would say that it's just important to be cognizant of that, and just, don't do the whole gent thing because everyone else is doing it, or whatever else comes along.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Well, and that should be a baseline, right?
Yeah.
Like, prog isn't follow the leader,
No, the point of it is the opposite.
Yeah.
It's follow the innovator.
Yeah. Well, the innovator becomes the leader at some point, I guess.
Right.
If you look at some of the bands that...
This sounds like a spiritual thing, or it's just like, it's like, I'm enlightened. It's like, no, you think you're enlightened, therefore you're not enlightened. It's like you can't point. Yeah. It's like something you can't point to because it keeps changing. Like
Well, yeah, and it should, right? Because
Yes.
that's the whole idea behind it. So
Right. But like we were saying before, sometimes it can, if it's changing too quickly, then it's, then it could lose the attention of people. Like, I think as much as we want this music to evolve, we don't. On some deep level of our nature, we want a lot of sameness, but we want just enough novelty to where it takes it to the next step. And that's where it's like, that's where we could appreciate it. Otherwise, it becomes a whole different dish,
I agree with that. Yeah. That
like,
kind of goes back to our conversation earlier about just how much different something is. It's got to have some level of agreeability to the audience, right?
Yeah.
The 15% ratio, I think you said something to that extent, right?
It's an art. The art is like how much you're pushing ahead of the status quo. Right. Where you've seen things kind of get stale and sort of like hold back too far, and just regurgitate the same theme, if you would, right? Like everyone's thumping now. It's like, yeah. And
I can't do that. That's
yeah.
intense.
I tried, like Tosin was showing how to do it. And it's so weird. It's one of those things where I really give it to him, man. Like, 'cause it's one of those things that will not work until you do it and you beat your head against it for quite a while, and then it starts to resemble something. And just for somebody to figure something out and even master and use something like that and bring a whole different sound to the style in that way, and to guitar playing in general, to expand what it is to be a guitar player, by going through this kind of like, taking a leap of faith, that thinking this is, well, I mean, to be fair, he did borrow the technique from Victor Wooten.
I heard that, yeah.
Yeah, because I've seen Victor do that. And that's an important point to make here. Sometimes you have to look outside to other instruments, to other genres, and I think that's what made prog evolve, is that it's not like we just synthesize the stuff out of nowhere, although sometimes we do. We're okay with like looking at country and classical music and jazz and video game music and whatever, and then bringing that in. And in an artful and tasteful way. And I think that's what prog is too.
Yeah, for sure. It's open-minded,
Yes.
and that's you reminded me when you said looking to other instruments as well.
Mm-hmm.
You reminded me of Consider the Source. Have you come across
Oh,
them
I
from
love
New
them.
York?
Oh yeah. I'm good, great friends with those guys. I seen them on my birthday, March 7th. That was the last show I went to,
Yeah,
and that was like, yeah. No, I'm a huge fan. I have like 4 shirts.
I'm a huge Consider the Source fan.
Oh, that's awesome.
So,
Yeah. They're great
yeah,
guys.
I love them, and just like what Gabe's doing with just Middle Eastern music and
Oh,
Eastern
yeah.
music, and it's not that, like, we've heard that sort of thing done before, but not like what he's doing.
No.
It's like just another
Oh yeah.
level.
Oh yeah.
And just some of the voice, his guitar just sounds like, doesn't even sound like an instrument. It's just a voice, and the way
Yeah.
he plays it and his articulate, it's
Oh,
man,
it's
I love
ridiculous. Oh yeah, I got a good amount of my friends into them over time, and especially back on my birthday in March 7. Like, it was cool that the gig was literally on my birthday, right? It was that was a great evening. Hang out with them backstage before they went on, up on stage. They're monster musicians, but beyond
Yes.
that, they're like, yeah, they and months before, in January, I hung out with them. With John, the bass player, for John Ferrara, and he was jamming with Wooten in the hard key booth. And
at NAMM, yeah.
yeah, and I shot that. I think he used my video. He put it up on Instagram. So, have you seen him play with Seth?
No.
Oh, so he has a side project with Seth Mutal, and Seth is a brilliant percussionist.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll likely have him on the show. We've had some pretty wild talks. I've interviewed, actually the first interview I've ever had, and it wasn't even for this podcast yet. It was like pre-podcast, like before, like a year or two before the podcast. I interviewed John, the bass player, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've been friends with them for a while. Anyway. The point is, they've studied in India. They've actually like spent a significant amount of time like really studying like with masters over there, and also Gabe has studied in Turkey, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and he plays these world instruments.
Yeah, he's got a lot of traditional instruments that
yeah.
he plays like authentically.
Yeah, authentically, and he brings that into the guitar. And having a
Yeah.
fretless is awesome because like he'll play these weird like alien scales to us, like that. He'll play outside of the 12 notes, that we know,
Mm-hmm.
and the phrasing that he brings to it too. It's so alien. Like I love it.
Yeah.
They describe themselves as sci-fi Middle Eastern fusion.
Yeah. But you know what? It's like you describe it as alien, and it's like it's way out of left field. But when you listen to the music, it's moving.
Yes.
It's like that is the element that
There's a song.
Yeah. I mean, I love their songs. They're monster
Yeah.
musicians. They're doing things that no one else is doing, but I love their songs. That's what it's all about. I think if you look at some of the great bands that have kind of like moved to genre, they've had all that. They've had those ingredients,
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
and they play a lot. Like they gig
Oh,
more than
yeah.
any other band I known. They do this thing called health touring, where they'll go out like out of their way to like hike and do all these like nature things as they're out on the road, and they're vegan. Right? I'm not a huge proponent for that kind of diet, but still, I mean, the idea is solid, of just taking care of yourself on the road. I remember Gabe saying, I can't wait to get home from the tour so I can have ice cream. It's like they're not allowing themselves any of that, right? They're just, and their energy is so tip top every night, you see them
Oh,
play
yeah.
live, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's
Yeah,
such
it's
a show.
incredible.
The first time I went to see them, like it was my drummer at the time was like, hey, check out these guys. I came to see them. I bought the 3 records they had out on the spot,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't even buy CDs usually. Like I usually support in other ways, but I couldn't help it. It was just so good,
Mm-hmm.
so good. On the entrepreneurial front, this is a cool point. They have an artist that does their artwork, who
Mm-hmm.
also does their merch. When they're well, he does all their merch, right? And he sells their merch when they travel, and so he tours with them, and
Okay.
he's manning the merch booth, and he's selling artwork, like actual just artwork. I actually have one of the pieces up here, just that guy's work, and it's a shame I don't know his name off the top of my head right now, but the guy who does artwork for Consider the Source, and that's a great symbiotic relationship, where this guy sells his merch that features his art, and so he's a great salesman of it, and it's just a win-win-win,
Mm-hmm.
so that's a really cool idea.
Yeah, yeah. He's directly involved with the band, and yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
When you described it, I like
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, that's just a great business relationship, personal relationship, and yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
uh so yeah, so they play a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Consider the Source, they're constantly active,
Mm-hmm.
um which is interesting. It's like they also teach Monday and Tuesday. They take off every week when they're touring, and they use those days to teach. And sometimes they're doing like workshops in colleges, and just Skype lessons and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
All 3 of them, and that's a great supplementary income. So I mean, that's how they're making their money. I mean, I guess they sell some stuff, and right now with this COVID thing, they're doing a lot of online concerts, Zoom concerts, and things like that,
Yeah,
subscription
I've seen
based.
some of that. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's, and I'm always interested in how musicians could support themselves, doing what they love to do, and and what the unique opportunities are that are available for doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's innovative in and of itself. Finding, because there's no prescription to it. To support yourself as a musician,
I
you
think
kind of have to find your niche.
Yeah,
You know.
we need to be like open to what's out there, as far as like we need to be entrepreneurial, right? Fundamentally,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think and I think it is in our nature, right? There is an aspect of entrepreneurialism that isn't in a common musician's nature, which is conscientiousness. Not many of us are just able to be so productive and live on a schedule and follow up when we need to, and all of that, right? Because that's the tedious part, right? That's the
Mm.
very very analytical part of the brain that isn't as active for a musician as often as the creative side, right? And so, which is why we've sort of relied classically on more business-minded people to help us, promote us, and all of that. But it's becoming easier and easier to take on some of this stuff, to build an infrastructure for fans and such, that can help you really support yourself as a musician. So, for example, anyone can make a Squarespace website and start a subscription service. Like, it's really easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's something requires just a little few extra steps, you got Google. I mean, you just need a will. If there's a will, there's a way.
Sure.
Yeah. So.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the whole subscription service thing is interesting, because that again is like, it involves a lot of thought and introspection, and like what product do you have? And it's my cat.
Oh, it's your cat. That's funny.
Yeah.
I thought it was your daughter for a second. I was like, wait, no, that's a cat. Oh, that's
Oh
cute.
yeah.
Yeah. What kind of
She
cat do you
makes
have?
away. Well, she's 18-year-old gray cat.
Wow.
And she's gray. I don't really know what kind of cat she is, but she's
like fluffy or like kind of short hair?
no, short hair. I'm pretty sure she's deaf right
Oh,
now.
really?
Yeah, but she's very clingy in her older years. So
Oh.
she comes down and she looks for me. You know, she's
Yeah.
wakes up somewhere. Where's Daddy?
Oh, yeah. No, I had a cat for 10 years until a few months ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I hear you. It's okay. You know, I got over the loss. And it's not like I don't know. My cat just went missing. Essentially, like you know,
Oh.
because I live up here and we would let him outside. You know, because we have property here. It's enough space.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some outdoor cats. They're fine, but
Mm-hmm.
he went missing. I have a feeling he some coyotes or some other animal got to him. Unfortunately, right?
Might have, yeah.
Yeah, it could have been anything, but yeah, I know cats are wonderful. Cats are wonderful. You know what I like about cats, right? Not that I'm going to take the whole conversation in the direction of cats, but what's the difference between dogs and cats? I was contemplating this when I was driving earlier. I was like, well, dogs are not in a negative way, but they're needy, right? They need
Oh,
our
yeah.
their love. They're pack animals, and they're very affectionate, right? Which is great, you know. Whereas cats are more like roommates, mostly, you know. They're independent.
Mm-hmm.
They need us a little bit less, you know.
A little bit less, yeah.
Yeah, especially if they're outdoor cats, then they're definitely like very little amount of dependence. You know, they'll just bug you for some food and then they'll do their thing.
Mm-hmm.
And and there's something interesting about that because I heard a psychologist talk about this. They're we coexist. We coexist, and
Mm-hmm.
and we have a symbiotic relationship, not one that's predicated on like need as much as just like, yeah, I'll tolerate you. Yeah, like, you know,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
and there's something cool about that, you know. I don't know.
Like
I
no, I was on that topic. Like the cat is with us because it chooses to be with us,
That's
not because
exactly
it
it.
needs to be with us.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I
Right.
agree with
I
that.
think cats collectively, evolutionarily, have chosen to make us companions, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I was joking with a friend earlier about like Elon Musk technology, like Neuralink. You know the whole Neuralink thing.
I've heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and like if we end up like, you know, augmenting animals' intelligence,
Well, if the
it's like
cat
cats are.
has its way,
Yeah, I mean, it's like cats are gonna take over the world, and maybe they'll keep us subservient, but you know, at least cats will be happy. I think that's where the conversation went.
cats will allow us off our leash when it's time for them to nap, if,
Yeah.
if they have control over us.
Oh man. Uh, people are pretty. A lot of people are. They're scared of the future that's to come with that kind of technology, because it's an inevitability that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and how that's going to play itself out could be a variety of different ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in that field, and I don't think I'll have much of a say on how it turns out, or maybe I'll have as much say as any citizen would, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Well, who knows? Maybe I'll have a big enough platform to say something that can resonate in some kind of way, or have some kind of social ripple. But I'm a musician after all, right?
You might have the leverage though, right? Going back to
Yeah,
the audience, right?
yeah.
You have leverage, and then you can have an effect on public opinion.
Perhaps be like a Joe Rogan kind of figure,
Right.
right? That'd be interesting. But you know, I'm just a musician. He's just a comic at the end of the day. But if you have here's the thing, it's like if you have conversations, right? Conversations are very powerful, and we
Mm-hmm.
can, you know, things you can move mountains with conversations. You know, more fundamentally the word.
Yeah, a true exchange of ideas and
Right.
listening and empathy and in that conversation.
Right. I mean,
that can move the mountains. Yeah.
exactly. And the word, we know, we speak. I mean this in a sort of figurative way, but in some ways a literal way. We speak the world into existence, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that we determine what it is we want to see or hear or whatever, what we want to experience or what we want the world to be like, and through our word, we create that. And I mean that in the sense that nothing. I don't care if you're Elon Musk or anybody. No one does anything alone, right? We basically, if we're convincing enough, we can speak to enough people, who inspire enough people to make a certain motion, take a certain thing and like start a company, say, and put things into motion and make actual change happen. And I mentioned Elon Musk because he's like the primary exemplar of that in the 21st century now.
Yeah.
Right. And of just, taking huge strides for humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people have criticisms of him, but like the level of, things that he's doing is just like, wow. It's a very inspiring time to be alive.
Yes.
And it's very inspiring to see someone who's, acting on that kind of level. Right. But either way, it's just, it shouldn't be something that we idolize alone, right? It should be something that we use as like evidence that people can do big things, right? And whether or not you think what he does is benevolent or not, right? I think it is, but regardless, we have that kind of power, right? We can, especially in this country, if you have enough of if you're inspired enough, then that you can articulate what it is that you learn as much as you can about whatever it is that you're trying to affect change in, and then you can, it's enough so that you can articulate and you learn to speak and write or whatever, and you can articulate that in a way that you can get other people to inspired about it, and maybe people who have more of a technical mind to work on the actual problem and collect those people together and actually, cause these things to happen. And that's how things, that's how things happen. Like, for example, with, going back to Tosin with his guitar company, it's like, it's not like he's sitting there carving out these necks and, like, he had the idea of like how he wants a guitar to be, right? And he designed that with Ibanez initially, but he was the designer of it. He really came up with everything. And then he's like, why am I having Ibanez do this? It's could be my own company. And he took that leap, which is, more power to him. That's a great thing to do. But then he got people, and he orchestrated his little, guitar building army, say, right? This team to make that kind of action, to take that kind of action and to build this thing, and to, I think that's a beautiful, uniquely capitalistic in a positive way thing.
Yeah, and it seemed like a natural progression too for him. Part of that is following, I mean, if from an outside perspective, it's like, well, he's got this very unique design. He has a giant fan base that is very dedicated and mostly also inspired by him as a guitar player. A lot of them are musicians. They're guitar players who are inspired by him as a guitar player. He's got a unique design. They would 100% be interested in playing or purchasing an instrument like that. It's only logical for him to have his own company. So it's not like a guy like that started out on a label and was like, oh, my goal is to have my own guitar company. No, it's like he's just kind of naturally following the course of events in the way that as opportunity arises. Right. He's not, I mean, he might have his own goals. I don't know him personally, but it's not like he's like reaching for something. He's like just going downstream, or, in a positive way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
No, I totally see that. And I think that's something I talk about frequently enough that it's like there's understanding your demographic and understanding that you making music alone is perhaps not all that you like. We define ourselves as guitarist, as musician, right, as performer or recording artist or whatever we label ourselves as, and some people just get stuck as that's all that I do because that's what I do, right? And then others like Tosin and others realize that, you know what, there is more to this, right? And when you look at the rise of entrepreneurship among musicians and artists in general, that's been a huge uptick since the 90s, right? You see this a lot in, you know, you see it like in say in fashion, say, and things like that. When it comes to, you know, hip hop, right? That's definitely a thing. And of course, you see collaborations of guitar players and other musicians with gear companies, right? To, you know, put out their own signature thing, but it's mostly developed by the company with just some tastes inputted of this artist, right? And then that helps the company. It's a mutually beneficial relationship, right? So that's great. But sometimes you have the case where you could really step out and do your own thing from the ground up, you know. But it didn't start that way. It started with Ibanez, and then he was like, you know what, I have more here. There's more to this. Yeah. And then he, you know, he had a following, so he knew that it wasn't just going to be crickets when he put this thing out. You know, that, and I think that's so powerful, that just that building that audience. And this is something that is doable. You know, even if you see just like, oh, I can get one new follower a day if I do this, this, and this, and this, just follow Gary V and he'll give you plenty of ideas. You know Gary V?
I think I know who that is.
Yeah, he's this like big social media guy, that like he started with taking his.
He's really intense.
He's very intense. Yeah, he's very intense.
I
but
think my friend Sean sent me some video.
I mean, he's great. His content is really solid, and he gives great advice as far as like, you know, expanding yourself online, right? And that's the most general way that I can put it. But the idea is that there are ways reliably to build an audience, right? And of course, that's just by being social on social media, right? And putting quality content out consistently. That's the formula, right? Consistency, quality, and be social. That's it.
So when does I'm curious, just from my own perspective, when, because you said, you know, a lot of us, some of us see ourselves as, you know, guitarists, performers, maybe songwriters or whatnot. What's the balance? Because when, I guess my main question would be, when does that entrepreneurial like initiative overtake in order for it to be successful? That seems like it could very easily overtake the other things.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a very great question, actually. And that you know what? The last interview I had was with this guy who was he was working on becoming a professional bodybuilder, and he explained to me how that as a guitar player, as he was as well, it did conflict. In fact, that like if he were to be serious about his bodybuilding career, his he wouldn't be able to tour in the same way, or, you know, he would have to turn down opportunities, and so they were at odds with each other. But they're frequently not, right? And I think it's very useful to study guys like Tim Ferriss. Tim Ferriss is the author of 4-Hour Workweek. Okay. And even in the title of that book itself, right? If you can run a company in 4 hours a week, then you have plenty of time for your music career. And that is to say that, yeah, there will be time to put those systems into place. But the name of the game is automation, right? And you need to make sure that and having a proper team. So if you've accumulated some capital, right? Let's say, you know, you've had some success in your music career, in that you don't have to be, when you're off tour, you have some free time, and you don't have to grind on a constant basis. Well, then you have you have a little bit more time to say, learn to automate some of this, or like if you create a business, how to, you know, run it in a more remote way, right? So I've seen a lot of different application of this, and so this can go many different ways. One of my guests he was talking about having a virtual assistant, right? So you can hire somebody very cheap. You can hire somebody at a competitive wage for them, but a very low wage for you to pay them. If you hire, say, like an assistant from onlinejobs.ph, which is Philippines, right? And so these are people with degrees who you'd be paying like a good wage to. But for them, a good wage ends up being for you like $2-3 an hour. So you're paying them like, I don't know, $300-400 a month for full time, 40 hours a week to do whatever it is that, you know, you're hiring somebody full time. And, you know, and if you have like some serious good work for them to do, then now you have that much more time in your day. So let's say if you hire somebody, it's like now instead of having 24 hours in your day, maybe you have 30 hours in your day, because you have somebody who can sort of, you can rather delegate some work to, you know. And so and once other people start getting involved, that's how you can sort of release the load and not have it, you know, be consuming of all your time. Another artist he had like a furniture making company, so it's a little bit more hands-on, so he really needed to be doing that, right? But then again, he started to, you know, figure out designs, like he was doing a studio furniture design for musicians, right? So makes sense, right?
Oh yeah.
When you're a musician, you have musician friends. Naturally, you're going to make products for musicians. So he was making studio furniture furniture, and it was custom. And then he started to figure out designs that worked, and now he has specific models. Now there was that initial period of time where he was really, you know, intense about it, right? And had to spend most of his time in the shop and whatnot. But then once he figures out that design and he can kind of put it into a mold or whatever, now it's more replicable and there's less time required, and he's created the leverage, and now he can sort of copy paste it, you know, if I'm going to put that in very basic terms, you know, and then have somebody who helps to automate that process of whatever, shipping it out or whatever different business operations that need to be handled, right? So yes, there's a lot to it, and there might be a big learning curve, but if you have an inclination as an artist to do something entrepreneurial, which you very well might, because what I was going to say earlier, psychologically we have like we have the propensity for being creative, not just in music but in life in general. I'm sure you have had plenty of product ideas, and you know, but you're like, okay, I'm not the guy that's going to do that because that's not my thing. But sometimes you stumble upon something that's close enough to where it's like, you know what, this sounds like something that I could create, and then step back and let it work for me. And usually those types of businesses are digital services businesses, like something that's replicable. Like I wrote a book recently, right? And so that's something where, you know, I just spent a couple hours here and there over a few month period to put something together that then I can sort of figure out a way, you know, to plug it into the greater system of, you know, selling that or whatever, right? You know, like get it distributed by Amazon and all of that, which I haven't done. I sort of sell it independently. Maybe I should put it on Amazon. But so I just finished that a few weeks ago, or maybe about a month ago at this point. But yeah, so that's something that could be created, and then once you make it, you don't have to put work into it anymore. It could just sell because it's an online product. You can just plug in marketing, and that's it.
Now, let me ask you this: as the author of a book, what if the again, it's a bit of an analogy, but
Mm.
it's tangible, very tangible for you. As the author of a book, in order to make your book successful, in order to create demand for the next book,
Mm-hmm.
you need to constantly, let's say, create illustrations of each chapter. Now, you're not an illustrator. You're a writer. You're a thinker, a researcher, but you have to create illustrations for each chapter, because that's essentially what's going to. You have to do this consistently, so that the people reading the book have more to grasp onto, that get them excited about the book and to create new fans of the book.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not an illustrator. You have no interest in illustrating. But this is what you need to do in order to create demand for your next book. And in doing so, you lose interest in the book, or you lose interest in writing, or maybe it kind of spoils the writing for you.
Well,
You see where I'm going with this?
Well,
It's
yes,
kinda-
I do, and that's there's a very common trope that I think is a toxic way to think, which is, if you want something done right, you need to do it yourself. And I completely disagree with that, right? So
Okay.
if you want something done right, you hire someone who is the best at that thing, or someone who loves doing that. Do what you love, delegate the rest. That's my motto. That's how I would approach that.
Sure, but okay, so that makes total sense.
Fiverr.com.
Yeah. That's what you would do in that situation.
Yeah.
But what if? So let's go back to being a musician. I mean, if you need to produce, and again, I'm just speaking from my own perspective
Sure.
with what I do with my music. I only care about. I mean, I care about connecting with people. I care about interacting with people. That's one of the reasons I enjoy being on, Facebook and Instagram, and any of the content I've ever produced for YouTube has been purely, from my perspective, something that could maybe enhance the music, or enhance something that maybe can give more. It can frame the music better, for people. But still, like, my main energy and all I care to put energy towards creatively is making and recording the music, and performing it when the opportunities comes along. So the idea of putting out consistent content feels artificial to me, because it's not in line with what I'm trying to do, but it's so necessary to facilitate what I'm trying to do. That's something I can't really get my head around at all with the whole thing.
I understand. So the way that I view that, right? So I use a website and an app called later.com, the app Later. So what that lets me do is schedule stuff, right? And I would say you do some things that create a good amount of content, and then often what we do is we sort of like spill all of that in one place, right? Whereas what needs to be done in order to kind of keep up with the algorithms, unfortunately, that these social media platforms have, is we need to cut that into pieces and iterate it out over time. So then we don't need to constantly, push out forced content, say, and then we can do that, and we can put out something in pieces, and then as whole. But then, so what I like to do when I'm planning social media posts, like let's say with my band or something like that, is like on paper, we're going to write, okay, what are all the different kinds of things we can post? Okay, so we can post photos of shows, photos from shows, selfies, like just basic selfies or whatever, right? And then just content to come, content from before, like, like music that's coming, maybe we can tease. maybe if it's been a while or it's some anniversary or something like that. And, you don't want to cross the line of, putting stuff out just for putting stuff out, right? There could be a balance that you could strike that is like you're putting out stuff that's of value and it's not just because you need to put something out kind of thing. Frequently enough where you don't become irrelevant or that, you fall on under the unfortunate like trap of like losing with the algorithms, right? So the algorithms are at the center of this, really, right? Mm-hmm. People have patience to some degree. The algorithms have less patience than the people, I find. So if you want to consistently, if you want Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter to rank you and to like show you to more people or to even your own audience, unfortunately, then you need to post with some kind of frequency, or in the case of Facebook, you might even need to have a certain amount of length to your content. I found if your videos on Facebook are shorter than 3 minutes, they don't get as much ranking. Wow. Right? Yeah. And so that's...
But who watches videos for 3 minutes on Facebook?
Well, I think Facebook is trying to make their own Facebook TV kind of thing, like their own video platform thing, and so they're going in that direction. So understanding, I feel like there's plenty of people who have become famous literally just from seeing or being early in some social media trend. Mm-hmm. Right, or on a platform with the first of the like IGTV or whatever, just kind of understanding that and then just running with it early, right? Mm-hmm. So I think being open to that, being open-minded in that way, into how you market yourself online is important, but it could be done authentically. It could be done to fit your own brand. Right. Mm-hmm. And without putting out stuff just for the sake of putting stuff out. So one way I would say is like spacing it out. But the other way is like, as Stephen Pressfield would put it in The War of Art, that book? So it's a great book, right? It's a book on procrastination, and writing and just being a creator, right? Like play on words, it's like a play on the art of war, but it's the war of art.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
so that's what it reminded me of.
Yeah,
first.
Right. It's not Sun Tzu. It's Stephen Pressfield, and what he talks about is, if you're a writer or any kind of creative person, professional, then you should have a schedule of like, and a ritual that you sit down and you write every day for like X period of time, and you just get into this routine. And it sounds like it'd be forced, but then your mind, your creativity will actually bloom in a way that once you sit down, like you'll be primed to just do this thing, mm-hmm. Right? And then once you're creating prolifically, as all professionals ought to, I guess, then you won't have a content problem. You will have more than enough content, and if anything, you'll want to hold back a little bit, maybe. Or even if you're so prolific, then you can be a candidate for somebody who has some kind of subscription based service on their website, where it's it's like you give people a taste, and then if you want like the whole thing, or you want like access to all of this, then for only $4.99 a month, and so on, right? So then that can be a way to get into that kind of thing. Yeah.
But that in and of itself. I'm just being super honest and off the cuff
Sure.
here. Like, that all makes total sense, and I'm listening to what you're saying. But as soon as you said like it could be $4.99 a month, all
right.
of a sudden I feel like it's an infomercial, and it's like we're writing music. You know what I mean? It just feels it feels so foreign and strange, and
oh yeah,
I'm not trying to
the most uncomfortable place for musicians.
It's so bizarre.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to like discredit anything you're saying, because you're right. You're absolutely right. But it's like, it's this strange, like I can't like rectify that in my head. Like,
right.
It's not compatible.
But like, check this out.
It should be.
You make take what's this, Neil Morse's app. You know, Neil Morse has an app.
I did not know that. No.
Right, so
I know Neil Morse, so he's great.
Yeah. He was my first episode, believe it or not. He
that's cool.
Yeah. He was episode 1. And then Casey Grillo, drummer of old drummer of Camelot, now Queensryche. So, what his app was about, and the way he explained it to me, and this might sort of like help this. It's like he has a lot of different demos and unreleased stuff and all of the stuff that he's done and all of the different bands he's been in. And he puts all of that available for like, I don't know, like $7 a month. Right. And for the amount of content on there, you know, it's very much worth it. And it continues to expand. Right. And it's actually much better deal than like, than buying all of that music. Right. So, and it supports him directly, right? So people are more than happy to do that and to support in that way. You'd be surprised. I mean, people like, take my money, you know, because they want you to do well because you do something well for them. And we really have a great impact on people. And sometimes it's shocking how much music can really help people in all kinds of circumstances. We forget often the power of what we do, and we undervalue it. And as musicians, we are very shy to ask to get paid, and that's taken advantage of in a major way. And so, essentially, it's important to take back some of that turf, right? I have a friend who's very active about, like, you know, venues like not paying musicians because they're doing it so they can promote themselves, right? And
that nonsense.
Yeah. And so that's horrible, right? And so, but that thing is happening on a more major scale with, like, let's say, just the whole advent of streaming and all of that. It doesn't serve the artists, and in that it does, you know, they don't earn from it unless they're like on such a level that it doesn't even matter, right? Mm-hmm. So it's one way to sort of take that back in, right, and bring it back to, you know, to the artist, and in that way, you know, it's a good thing to do, right? Now, the idea is to provide more value than the money you're asking, and I think if you're doing that, and if that's done, and you can rationalize that, then I think that will be a lot less. It'll feel a lot less weird, you know, to do, mm-hmm. you know, to broach that.
Absolutely. But then there's the next, and this is, I'm enjoying this conversation because I've thought a lot about these sorts of things. I haven't received the insight that you're sharing with me, mm-hmm. but I can bounce like these questions off you. So like, if you talk about like Neil Morse's app, let's say pick like a favorite record of yours, mm-hmm. just anything,
like one of his, or just in general?
No, just in general. Like, okay. Let's say you really love like The Wall, or
okay,
Pink Floyd,
mm-hmm.
you know, and you know that record, you know, front and back, and it's like that's immortalized. Would you want the demos of that? Would you want all the extra content? I mean, I guess like in studio pictures is kind of cool. I guess, you know, you could find the right content that does enhance the experience, but do you want all of the extra stuff that maybe diminishes what the final product is crystallized in your mind as? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like,
right.
There's
well,
that.
I think I in a way I do, because I appreciate and I love that sometimes the live version is even more exciting, right?
Sure.
You know, and I think what people want with social media, and I think what social media has enabled, which is great, is that for as big as a band gets, we want to think that they're our close friends, and that it's like, because their music is so intimate with who we are, and like, you know, it was there at times for us that's just so close. Mm-hmm. And then if we can get the opportunity to get a closer peek into, you know, like, hey, come, you know, see us recording in the studio, and that kind of thing, it could be that that's why people pay VIP. For example, you guys had the VIP when we were on tour together, and that's why people invest extra, and that's a sort of like kind of the VIP thing. Like people like that closer attention. They like to feel like they're in that crew. They're an insider, right? People love to be an insider, and it's not just for show. It's like the band will gain these relationships with these people. I remember a few of the shows that we played on that tour. There were these couple of dudes that I seen several times. And I've seen them at shows, outside of our tour, like in the past, and they keep coming, and it's cool. It's just nice, and they're just very into what you're doing, right?
Oh,
and
of
so,
course, yeah.
right, and I don't think it's taking advantage of that to offer them more value, So they want things, like they are waiting for you to come out with things for them to buy. So money is energy, like we talked about before, right? And it will show up for people who need it the most, I think, right? And I think that's a very optimistic kind of statement, but there's other factors, but people spend on what they like, and that's just the nature of the game, right? And if you create something of value for people, then it give people the honor of giving you their money. We have a very dirty way to look at money oftentimes, and I think it's very I don't think it should be that way. Like, I don't think money is inherently bad or anything. It's just literally just energy, and they want to give you that. And we ought to get the support from it, from doing what we love to do. And if we do it on an independent way, right, where we're not working on a huge label or whatever like that, then we need the support. We need all the support we can get.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I feel like if it's hard to reconcile, just remember that it's really like you're offering value, and perhaps more value than you're charging for. And one way, the whole subscription thing is just it's a great thing, because it's not like they're a fan of you and not tomorrow, and they can always stop their subscription, right?
That's true. Yeah.
There's no force here,
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting. A lot to think about there.
Yeah.
That I had never thought about before. But yeah, it's good conversation, man.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we covered a lot of things. I'm curious, because we didn't discuss it too much. So what does your workout look like? How do you handle physical activity?
Well, I try to stay as active as possible. I just do like I don't go to the gym or anything, I used to have like a little routine I would do every day, but now I'm roughly every other day.
Okay. And what is that?
Well, I'll do like some weights. I'll do some push-ups, some squats, and some ab stuff, and it's really just to give myself some energy. Because I found if I don't do that stuff, I simply lose energy. So it makes me feel good, and it just kind of keeps me going. It's good psychologically, I think.
Sure.
So that's the main reason I do it.
Okay. What is your do you, well, I'm curious, like, what your routine looks like. How do you get up around the same time daily, and what does all that look like?
It's all around my daughter. So
yeah, of course.
Yeah, anything I can do is when she's napping.
Mm-hmm.
And then pretty much anytime she's sleeping. So, napping, I'll usually practice a little bit based on how long I think the nap might be. Practice a little bit, exercise, eat some late lunch. And then at night when she goes to bed, I can get back into working on music or whatever I'm If I'm practicing or writing or recording or whatever it is. So.
Were you a night owl prior to her?
No, I'm a morning person. Like, I love
see.
working in the morning. Yeah, like I get up early and practice in the morning. So by the time I come down to my studio at night, I'm just like, I have a cup of green tea. I'm drinking caffeine just to stay up because I'm ready to go to bed, but I can't. So
Right. Yeah, you got work to do.
that's the energy aspect. So if I exercise during the day, I actually have more momentum going through the day, getting through the evening. So.
Green tea is a great idea because if you drink it at night, it's not likely to impair your sleep because of the L-theanine in it.
Okay.
Do you know about this?
No.
It's a really cool thing. So when you pair L-theanine with caffeine, L-theanine is an amino acid existent in matcha, right? In caffeine, in green tea, that helps sort of zen out the caffeine effect a little bit, and it helps to it helps to get rid of jitters that are caused by caffeine, and also prevent you from that. If you have the caffeine in the absence of the L-theanine, then you can stay awake. It's harder to go to sleep for a lot of people. So that's just like a little biohack to, if you're ever taking caffeine, let's say you drink black tea or something like that, then if you take L-theanine on the side, not many people just have L-theanine as like random amino acid, whatever, but it's just one of these things, supplementally. On supplements, do you take any supplements? Do you
Yeah, so I take a multivitamin, and then fish oil, vitamin C, vitamin D, and a low-dose aspirin. So the aspirin's because I had 2014, I think it was. I have to think. I had a heart surgery.
Really?
Quite a few years ago. Yeah, it was a condition I had since I was a little kid. And it was like an aortic aneurysm that was developing over time. So
wow.
I had that taken care of. So I just take the low-dose aspirin as recommendation from my cardiologist, and that's just a part of my daily thing too. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So okay. Yeah, and I mean, it's not easy to have a young child, and that's a tough age too.
Oh sure, yeah, man. She runs you ragged, but it's all your mindset.
Yeah,
that governs how you handle it. So
for sure.
And then what you have left at the end of the day for your career.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's next for you? What's on the horizon?
Well, I'm kind of working on music loosely. I'm always kind of working on music, but after I do records, I go through this period where I just kind of practice a lot. So trying to rethink what I'm doing, get some fresh ideas and fresh approaches, and then that usually snowballs into writing more, and it's always
right.
And I'm not currently working on any band projects, so I have instrumental music in my mind, and then that next release is kind of like what I'm pushing towards now. But
cool.
I don't know what might come up in the meantime.
How do you go about finding new things to work on? You were saying to expand your technique and stuff. Do you kind of pick up some instructional stuff? How do you go about that?
No, I try not to follow. I'm a big fan of guitar players, but I try very hard not to do what they do. So I just listen a lot to music I like and that I don't understand. I listen to a lot of guitar music. I know a lot of people will listen to music that's not guitar based. I just love guitar. I listen to guitar music.
Right.
And then when I put my hands on the instrument, I really try and use my imagination and just explore it in ways that I want to hear it. and I try not to learn anything from anyone else. I try and just kind of like, it's a lot of times it's hit or miss, but I'm just pursuing my own voice.
Sure. Without really like directly, sort of sourcing something like from someone's very like specific technique or something. So it's just more like you're inspired and then you just sit down and just see what comes down.
Yeah. Or just, even just tone. Sometimes you probably understand this. I mean, just playing with a different tone, you'll play different ways.
Oh, totally.
So if you just think about the tone you're using and embrace what that can do.
Yeah. Sometimes I scroll through the default presets on the sax effects because there's hundreds, and just like go to a random place and they all sound good, because it's just the sax effects. So, and yeah, it totally inspires a different direction. So that's definitely the case. That's definitely the case. Yeah, or I'll put on a backing track of just some like some flamenco or some really foreign stuff that would push me in a different direction as well. And if I'm just trying to jam or whatever, and that could inspire like a whole like a song or whatever. Although I haven't been so active on writing for years, and I feel like it's something that, like you were saying before, like. I'm actually pretty invested in like entrepreneurial pursuits and a lot of other stuff and dietary stuff, and like I said, what I'm doing right now with my diet, gaining and losing, making videos about it, where it's like, oh wait, I'm not doing the music thing so much because that's where my time is going. Right? So
that was my question before. It's like
it was, yeah. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with taking the hiatus in a sense to do these different things and to take these little journeys. Like I love traveling, right? And I love to really immerse myself in where I am and consume the culture and learn some language and because I think that just expands you as a person, right? And if you're expanded as a person, then naturally you'll be expanded as an artist. That's
Sorry.
good.
She comes back.
Yeah. She's like, I'm back.
Yeah. That's why I think she's a little hard of hearing. She just announces herself.
Yeah.
She'll just like loudly.
Yeah. So that's it's funny you asked that because that is something I'm thinking about. I often juggle too many things, and so I try not to do more than like 3 things at the same time or something like that.
And that makes total sense, yeah.
Yeah, because then there's no focus, right? And if you want momentum, you need to really spend a lot of time in one place.
Yeah.
You need to build something up, and So, but even for somebody who is dabbling a lot in a lot of different things, then they can at least get like, say, well, if they're building a following who is interested in this dabbling or whatever, then they could be supported for their dabbling, right? Which is how like these like very tangential YouTubers get paid, because it's just like, if you have a following, you have a following, and then then there's merch, then there's whatever. But I'm very much in I'm like a Renaissance man, like I really like to explore a lot of different things, and so I seldom get stuck in one thing for too long, right? And it's I think it's positive and negative, right? It has its pluses and minuses. On the positive, I have a broad range of experiences, and I can draw from this and that, that so that when I do focus on 1 or 2 things, then it can serve me, and I have experience that's more wider ranging. But that seldom happens, right? It happens less frequently. I sort of find myself here and there, and in a very much most ways of my life. So
yeah, it comes down to what you value, what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Right. So,
yeah.
And that's all that matters.
Yeah. And I think once a part of like the idea of moving into the small house is that I can actually have the time to not have to worry about certain financial obligations and stuff, because I'll rent won't be a thing, and I could live a lot simpler, and then with that I can actually put larger swaths of time into writing, because I'll be like right there with my setup, and I could just pump out material, and I think ultimately be more productive. But when I do decide to take a break, I could be in the middle of the Colorado or somewhere, and just go to awesome restaurants, hang out with different people, and go to the beach, and just live.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the dream right now. So let's see what happens. So where can people find your music?
www.michaelabdow.com. Just my website. So when you go there, I mean, if you are looking for MP3s or streaming or CDs, it can be all accessed there.
Wonderful.
So
wonderful.
Yeah.
And where can people find you on social?
I'm on Facebook, Michael Abdow Music, and on Instagram it's just Michael Abdow, the underscore in between.
With the underscore. All right.
Yeah, and you can get to all those through the website too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So it's been a blast having you on. I'm not going to keep you up too late.
No, it's cool, Alex. It's been super fun, man.
Yeah.
And like enlightening, and learned a lot.
Oh yeah. Well, I enjoyed this conversation plenty, and it's great to catch up, and hopefully we can end up on tour again together, or if I'm on tour in my house, then maybe I'll stop by.
If you're up in Massachusetts, yeah, man, let me know. Well, you're not that far to begin with.
No, actually, I was in Massachusetts like hours ago.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah,
Really?
I was down in the bottom left corner.
So like Great Barrington area?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I just drove in to run an errand, and that's it. That was it. But yeah. So I'm not that far away, so we can link up.
Cool, man.
All right. So it's been great having you. Cheers.
Cheers.
And,
yeah.
and have a great night.
Yeah, you too. Keep in touch.
You too, man.